Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here. Today, moving on to some chaos content here for an index review here with my friend Hugo. How's it going, Hugo?
I'm going pretty good. I'm excited to talk about my one true love in Age of Sigmar, Tzeentch.
Oh yeah, Corn isn't up there as well?
Yes, but the Tzeentch is why I got back into the hobby. The big Lord of Change, that's the Kairos model. That's why I got back into it. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so for everyone at home, we had, Hugo's been very patient today, waiting for me to get not only the slides done, but also an hour's ish worth of audio, trying to solve some audio problems with my Mac. So hopefully this goes well. If you notice that we're a little bit tired already, it's because we've been at it for an hour, and he's 6 hours ahead of me back in the Netherlands. So if we're looking at a summary right now, we've got our battle traits, enhancements, Warscroll breakdown, and army lists, and then a conclusion, just like we've done in the other ones thus far, which will be Lumineth and Idneth up to this point. Okay, so looking at some battle traits, as anyone that is out there knows, everything's been condensed onto one page, which, in a certain sense, for the Chaos armies, is actually relatively, I guess, quote unquote, brutal in that we lost things like summoning for the most part. And then, like in this case, we also lost fate points, which of course was our summoning mechanic, but we don't interact with that anymore. What we do have here is one thing that we will recognize on the left-hand column, which we'll be talking about momentarily, and then three new abilities that are basically just sub-abilities for each other. So Hugo, let's go ahead and start with Masters of Destiny. So I'll just give a quick description, and then let's have you weigh in on it. So for those of you out there that don't know, this is basically just the normal Destiny dice system. Basically, at the beginning of the game, you're going to roll all 9 of your dice, and then they can be swapped in for certain things down below. We'll see that you can swap in for casting rolls, unbinding, and banishment, plus run rolls, charge rolls, but only in your turn, hit rolls, wound rolls, and save rolls. Now, I've got a little pop-up here that says, and this is I learned some of these things from playing Hugo about a week and a half ago or so. They can't be used for attacks and damage. I don't remember if both of them were possible in the 3rd edition book, but I feel like both might have been possible in the 2nd. In any case, at least one of those was possible at one point. We also need to distinguish between run rolls being different from the run as a keyword. So for example, redeploy has the run keyword, but doesn't involve a run roll. So you're not using it for like a 6-inch redeploy, at least as it's currently written. It also doesn't work with countercharge, but that's why they wrote it's only for charge rolls in your turn. And then, as Hugo pointed out for me, a magical intervention evidently doesn't suffer a -1 to cast if you use Destiny dice to do so, because as it says here, I'll go back to that point there, as it says here, they can't be modified except by debuffs, I guess, by your opponent. Okay, Hugo, what do you want to add into that? How strong are Destiny dice now? Is this the best battle trait we've got? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So Destiny dice, it's still amazing. They have been nerfed slightly. By the fact that indeed, so in the previous book we indeed could do damage, not attack amounts, but we could do damage, but it didn't really matter because we didn't have any big damage like attacks. It was only damage from attacks, not from spells. But yeah, the fact that you still get casting, you still get charges, you still get run rolls when you need it. It's just super good for just consistency, and this is probably one of the best just battle traits in the game, where in the dice game, cheating dice, it's so good. I love this. The fact, yeah. So one of the first things I thought, oh, you can counter charge, but no, sadly, it's only charge rolls in your turn. So yeah, they took care of that, because otherwise it would have been probably too good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's still amazing. The fact that you can now take debuffs is a little bit worse, because previously you couldn't take any debuffs. So like minuses to hit and wound or minuses to charge didn't matter. But yeah, it's still really good. Also the fact with like the fact that people can now reduce your charge by d6, meaning that if you're 3 away, you can still automatically make the charge. I've had this a couple of times against Seraphon, for instance, where they can very easily do it, and then you can still run up to 3, auto-make your charge, not have to worry about it. Even like with a 3, I think this is still an amazing battle trait.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that this stayed because it's obviously, I think summoning is less broken than this ultimately, but obviously GW is trying to cut summoning entirely out of the game, of course, so you don't have to bring a million models with you just in case. Yeah, and then I don't know. I mean, this is just one of those abilities that's hard to compare to almost any other army. It's like you said, you're basically cheating. But, at least your opponent's aware of which dice you have available. So if you roll particularly low, I guess they know you can't hit some of those big charges or get some of those big casting rolls. But you've got other ways to guarantee that the dice get better, which we'll talk about later. Okay.
Yeah, and
yeah, go for it. Go for it.
It's also one of the things I've changed from the previous book is there's no more ways to gain new dice. Basically, there's no more ways to gain new dice. There's one very minor way. You have a couple of ways to replace some.
Yeah.
But the amount of dice you have is gone down, and the quality of the dice has gone down. But it's just so good still.
Yeah. Sorry for the pop-up there. I'm trying to make sure I'm not getting any disturbances here while we're recording. Okay, so let's move on to the shooting stuff. So if I scroll through these, going on to conflagration of Tzeentch. Hugo, I'm going to cover these real quick, then let you break it down for us. Also good to say that you've actually played tons of games. How many games have you played at this point with Tzeentch?
Probably like 20. I played like 6 or 7 games with the demon with like a demon list, and like 10 or 12. Now must be more than like close to 15 games with the Zangor heavy build.
Nice. Yeah. Thus far, I have not. So that's one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on here. Not only because you're a very competitive player, you went 6-0 Worlds teams, but also because you've put a lot of time in, probably more than almost anyone else in our community. So it's pretty amazing. And high quality games too, from what I've understood. So that's great. Okay, so let's, the 3 new abilities here are all having to do with the Weird Flame / burning system, I guess you could say. So once per turn army, any shooting phase, so that can be in your opponent's shooting phase as well. Pick an enemy unit that had any damage points allocated to it this turn by Weird Flame spell abilities or shooting attacks made with weapons that have the Weird Flame weapon ability to be the target, and then you give it the burning keyword. There's no keyword. There's no roll. So obviously you could do this with any of your guys that have the shooting attack that has Weird Flame keyword or a spell that has that in your own turn, and then you pick one of those units that got damage points allocated. And then in your opponent's turn, either with a magical intervention, covering fire, or both, you could try to trigger this and then keep putting that burning keyword on things. So moving on to the next ability before we have Hugo break it all down for us. Once per turn army, end of any turn. So this is same timing except end of the turn. And so if you get it once per turn, twice per battle round. You're going to be rolling D3 for each burning enemy unit on a D3 2-3, so on a 3 up on a D6. Inflict an amount of mortal damage on that unit equal to the roll, which the average there is 1 2/3 mortal damage. And then, but on a 1, so on a 1 or a 2, so 33% of the time, that unit no longer has the burning keyword. Looking forward to hearing what Hugo has to say about this, because I think you mentioned that your opinion might have shifted a bit since the last time I talked to you about it, but I'm curious to hear everything in a moment here. And then moving on to quenching the flames, this is a passive ability that's always on. If a burning enemy unit uses an ability that would heal or return slain models to that unit, instead of healing or returning slain models to it, it no longer has the burning keyword, meaning they basically have to blow a CP to rally or use one of their abilities just to get rid of the keyword, and then the next time they get a chance to use it, then they can actually heal or bring things back. Okay, Hugo, break it all down for us. What are you thinking about Weird Flame? And maybe walk us also through what your kind of your kind of journey has been with Weird Flame thus far, what you initially thought of it before you actually got any models on the table, what your initial impressions were after putting some models on the table, and now what your current version of understanding of how strong or weak this is.
Yeah, okay. So when this was first revealed, I was like, why why do you have 4 battle traits, or basically 3 out of 4 battle traits to do one thing? Where this could have been just one ability, like, oh, you hit someone with the burning thing to give him one, or like it could have been way more easier. But I get, yeah, it's I don't know. I kind of dislike that, but overall, I think this is a fine ability. My main problem, I have 2 main problems with the ability, but the overall power level is fine. So let's first go over the first ability. So you can apply it in your shooting phase to anybody who's taken anything from Weird Flame or Weird Flame spell. An important thing to note that in your shooting phase, you can apply it at any moment. So you can shoot someone, or like shoot someone with horrors, do 1 damage, apply the burning to get your bonuses. Or you can, with the Weird Flame spell, first thing you do in the shooting phase, you can apply the burning to someone. So it doesn't have to be at the end. The burning itself, it's fine. It's some mortal damage. I think it's rolling the 1 is super feels bad. I really want them to remove that, because one of the things that happens now is that with one of the sub-factions, you're basically incentivized to not use the ability, which I think is just bad game design, but oh well. Then the last one is, it's the standard what Nurgle used to have. Oh, if you heal or something, then you get, there's no healing happens, no returning models happens. It's just burning is removed and that's it. I think it's fine. It's not been really impactful. Especially in the builds that I've been playing, it's basically done nothing. I've literally just used it for the last ability to like stop someone healing or stop someone returning models. And then in a demon build, it does something. But overall, it's very mediocre, and I kind of dislike the ability itself.
Okay, so is your opinion mainly just changed with the formation then?
The formation has been better than I expected, but I just find the ability really frustrating to play with, because you can only apply to 1 unit and 1 unit a turn, and the fact that it goes away on a 1, which Nurgle Disease doesn't, means that like rolling the 1, you already don't get any mortal damage, but you're also then it goes away, so it's a double feels bad. So I just dislike playing with the ability in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what they would maybe change for that, and whether that's because GW is usually more used to nerfing things that are too good, but not necessarily buffing things that are too weak. So it makes me think it might go for a while without getting any attention, that they'd be more likely to just shift the points around and not change the ruling on this. Obviously, when they get a new battle tome, they have the chance to be updating it. But who knows when that's going to end up happening. So I don't know. Do you feel like Destiny Dice alone is strong enough to be like whatever about the right-hand column?
Yes, Destiny Dice alone, just like you can do so much cool stuff with Destiny Dice. If we only kept Destiny Dice, I would have been totally fine with it. And my first reaction was, okay, cool. We kept Destiny Dice. We knew summoning was going to go away, but we kept our most powerful and I think most flavorful ability from the last, well, basically from since I first started. So I that's more than powerful enough. I think with some touch-ups, the Weird Flame can be fine. It's like the Nurgle Disease. It can be fine.
Okay, cool. All right, so moving on to the battle formations. Well, the one we were just referencing is Weird Flame Host, but that'll be the last one we cover. So we've got the Arcanite Cabal, Change Host, Zongor Coven, and Weird Flame Host. Starting with the Arcanite Cabal, we'll be adding 1 to unbinding rolls for friendly Arcanite units. In addition, if a friendly Arcanite unit unbinds a spell, no command points are spent for that unit to use the magical intervention command in that phase. So first off, it's good to take an inventory of which units are the Arcanite units that can unbind. That would be the Zongor Shaman, the Ogroid Thaumaturge, the Curseling, and 2 Magisters. You might be thinking, well, aren't Kyric Acolytes also Arcanite Wizards? Well, they were, but not anymore, so that's a thing. And then you could also be thinking, well, with unbinding rolls, maybe I have a non-casting, like a non-wizard hero that's Arcanite, like the former Fate Master, that could activate a Place of Power and then have unbinding. But alas, as far as I'm aware, there's no non-wizard caster in the arm or even hero in the game anymore. Is there?
No, I don't think so. I think everybody's a wizard now.
Yeah.
I can't even think of because I took out the Fate Master and he was the only one. And I think all the heroes are wizards now. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, having +1 to unbind, as I mentioned kind of in my comments up above, it's basically giving you 2 rare buffs, which is +1 to unbind, which we just don't see that often outside of Tzeentch. And then we've got essentially a free CP to do a thing, which we're not seeing too often in the game right now. Now, obviously, this would only be if you unbound in your opponent's turn, because you, as far as I'm aware, you can't do magical intervention in your own turn. I don't think that's no. Of course you can't.
No, you cannot.
Yeah, so that's basically just in your opponent's turn. If they have a non-casting army, then I guess you know that has no impact. But you're getting +1 to unbind. That's pretty good. I assume if you're rolling with lots of Arcanite casters, then there's something to be said there. That said, Hugo, how big are you on the Arcanite casters just in and of themselves? I know you like the Shaman, but what about the other ones? Do you feel like it's something you want to take enough to lean into this sub-faction or this formation?
No. Disability. It has 2 parts, and one of them is really good, and one of them is really good, but you never will use it. So the +1 unbind is really good. There's basically nothing else in the game that gets +1 unbind. Like I haven't seen anything outside of Tzeentch that has a +1 unbind, and Tzeentch can go up to +2 to unbind, which is really significant. The problem with the free CP for magical intervention is that you're using it on a wizard who has base no casting bonuses, or might have a +1, but if he has the +1, you have the big man himself, Kairos, next to him, and he is way more reliable at casting the spell that you want, or like an invocation. So when I played this, I wasn't even using the free CP because I wanted to cast a spell, so I used Kairos. So yeah, it's like an unbind, which is fine, but I found that it's just not worth it. It's cool. It allows you to somewhat break the game with the CP economy, but I just don't think it's good enough. Mainly because the Arcanites themselves are not good enough.
Yeah. I mean, also you mentioned earlier that at least currently you can't have your if you use Destiny dice for magical intervention, you're not getting hit with the -1. So I suppose that works a little bit better. But of course, Kairos would be also benefiting from that, right?
But if you Destiny dice this, you don't get you get like a free one, but then you're spending 2 Destiny dice in your opponent's turn, where I don't think it's going to be amazing, and especially because Kairos has this amazing spell that it's I don't know. I think you almost never use this. I've tried it. I've tried it with the Curseling, and I'm giving him the +1 to cast, and then giving him basically going all in on this, and then it was still very mediocre. So I was like, okay, if I go all in and it's still mediocre, it's just not amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, let's take a look at Change Host. This is the one I don't really understand, but what it does is once per battle, end of your turn, so only in your turn, pick a friendly Disciples of Tzeentch demon unit that is in combat to be the target. So that could be a hero or a regular foot troops type of unit. Roll a die. On a 3-up, remove the target from the battlefield and set it up again on the battlefield. Now that sounds kind of cool, but then you realize each model in the target unit must be set up in combat with any of the enemy units that the target that the target was in combat with before it was removed from the battlefield. Meaning, like you could basically switch your orientation around whatever number of units that you were in combat with. So if, smooth brain, I guess you're in combat with 1 unit, then, and it says each one of your models. It's not like your unit has to just have one model touching the combat range. All of them do. So you teleport them, and then they got kind of just switch sides, maybe shift around a bit to get onto an objective and steal an objective. If you're in combat with two different units or more, obviously you just have to pick one of those units for that to qualify, or just any combination of it, as long as each model is still in combat with any of those units. And so maybe a little bit more flexibility depending on how they've screened you out, I guess. But the problem I have with this is, first off, on a 3-up, I would think that this would be every turn, not just once per battle. And because I still don't know if it would be worth taking if that was the case. And then having it be once per battle, gosh, is just on a 3-up. I don't get it. If it's going to be once per battle, it seems like it should just go off automatically because it's not that broken, in my opinion. But Hugo, what am I missing here? Do you think this actually has some secret tech that I'm missing out on?
No, I think you're spot on. I think Chains Host is still in prison from second edition. I don't know why they called it Chains Host, because it's like nothing like Chains Host. The fact that, like everything you said, the fact that it's on a 3-up meaning that 2 out of 3 games you don't have a subfaction or battle formation. It's like the in combat restriction I'm not too worried about, because you could do some funky stuff like teleport all the way to the other side of a unit and like rescreen, and like you could I wouldn't mind that part. But the fact that it's once per battle, so you can try it on one unit and then it's a 3-up, I think this is just this is one of the abilities where I read it and like, did they really do actual development work and test this in game and then see, wait, this doesn't really work?
Yeah.
I think this is absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it might be one of the worst or formations I've seen thus far. I mean, obviously Tzeentch has got some good stuff going for it in general, but this just seems like a place filler. You said if I'm not mistaken, you said 2 out of 3 games that you won't have a subfaction, but I think you meant the other way around, right?
Yeah. 1 out of 3 games you won't have a subfaction. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then let's move on to Zongor Coven. This one seems to be pretty strong to me. If you're running a Warflock, which is kind of a new keyword, if I'm not mistaken, it's basically all of your Zongor units. But it says each time a friendly Warflock unit uses the rally command, you can make 3 additional rally rolls of a d6. And if you don't know how rally works, it's a command ability, of course. You use it in your hero phase if you're not in a hero phase if you're not in combat. And then you roll 6 dice. You get +1 to that if you have a musician, and this is adding an additional 3. And for each 4-up you get, you can modularly choose between bringing models back with that many health characteristic, if you can match it, and or just healing wounds back. So as I mentioned in the comments above, it's assuming you want to be rallying, which is a question of CP use. But this raises the average heal or resurrect from 3 to 4.5 base, slightly more for Zongors because they have a musician. And I mean Zongors on foot, the regular big unit of foot troops, because they get +1 die to that as well. Hugo, what are you thinking about this? You like to run Zongors. Is there a version of this reality where this is your choice?
I think in a full Zangor heavy build, you pick this more because there's no other real amazing. Like you could go Arcanite, but there's just no good real amazing thing for Zangor. Like this is good or this is fine. I like it for the shamans actually, because being able to like reliably heal 4 to 5 wounds on the shaman has been actually really nice. It also works well in tandem with what the Zangor build is trying to do, which is have big bricks that won't get killed in one go and then heal them back up. But as you said, you will rarely have CP for this. So it's nice to have. I've been using it, but it's been nothing amazing.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, and then on to Weird Flame Host. So this is the one we've been referencing, I guess. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made by burning enemy units. So if you remember, burning was you can give that keyword out with the regular battle traits without using any extra rules once per turn, assuming you got the spell or a shooting attack to do some damage. And then you could have those units lose burning either by healing or you rolling a 1 when you're trying to do mortal wounds on them, a D3 1, I should say, when you're trying to do mortal wounds to them with that ability. But otherwise, as long as they've still got that keyword, they have -1 to wound rolls, and that's for all attacks, including shooting attacks, not just combat. So I said above, it leans into the Weird Flame burning mechanic as a defensive buff, but it's largely dependent on them not removing the keyword or you not removing the keyword. But you were telling me before we went live with this that you were saying this is starting to become the standard. Can you fill us in with your thoughts on what's going on with Weird Flame and maybe why that's changed?
Yeah, so I think this is, if you're building a list, you start with this, and unless you have a good reason to pivot to something else, you just keep this, because the -1 to wound is a very good debuff. Being like on burning units also means that you can really apply it very targeted to, like, okay, their hammer is coming in, or like a big dude you want to stop. You can apply this fairly well. My main problem that I used to have with this, and I still do, but it's a little bit less, is that if you take this, you're incentivized to not deal the D3 damage. The D3 mortal damage, just because you want to keep this on targets, and it's more valuable to not use your ability and keep this. I think it's a fine debuff. I just dislike the playstyle it creates. I dislike what it incentivizes. I like that they decide to have more interactions and tie-ins with burning, because that's one of the things I was hoping they would do. Is, okay, we're going to create a new mechanic, and then we're going to have all these different units interact with burning. So that I don't mind. I just need them to fix the burning where it doesn't go away on a 1, and then I would be all in favor of this subfaction.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially considering it impacts your shooting attacks, and sometimes I know the Zongor builds aren't this way, but a lot of Tzeentch heroes are trying to kind of stay in a castle to keep away from getting meleeed or melee shot, and I guess this is also really making a difference there. Granted, a lot of the big shooting threats out there right now have auto wound crits, so I guess that would be skipping the wound roll. But even still, it seems like that's just pretty good that it's hitting both sides of the attack equation. Okay, so
yeah,
go for it.
The -1 to wound, it's there's a lot of out wound, but there's also just a lot of high volume shooting. Like 60 has a bunch of like, oh, here's 60 attacks, or like 40 attacks on 3s and 3s, or 2s and 3s, or -1/1, and there it starts to do real work. Or like a big cannon or something. I've actually found that the -1 to wound in shooting has been also pretty good. Even with the auto wound stuff, it still removes some of the damage there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I had a summary slide here, which is basically my thoughts after our first talk about this, but feel free to correct me here. A few points that I put in here is the set of formations we've got are a bit lackluster compared to some other indexes. Weird Flame Host is a sort of non-bow, as you mentioned, with the whole right-hand column of your battle traits, but even still is probably the current standard option. I guess I shouldn't say the whole right-hand column. It's mainly with the doing the mortal damage. And the fact that your opponents can heal it away. But anyway, and I said, if you're not doing Weird Flame Host, otherwise go for either Arcanite, Cabal, or Zongor Coven, depending on your list. And then Change Host is probably very limited in utility. You have any reactions to this set of comments, or anything you want to add, Hugo?
No, I think this is totally fair. I think if it was without any Warscrolls, this would have been totally correct. But I think the problem with the Arcanite Cabal, as I said, is just the Arcanites are not great, so that's why you really don't see it. But yeah, and in the full demon build, I think the Weird Flame is fairly good. Okay. I've come around more and more to it, that it's been better and better the more I actually played against it.
Yeah. How often do you see the keyword getting removed? Is that something that opponents are having a lot of luck with, or are focusing on with their healing abilities, or does it usually stay for quite a while?
So it depends, because there's some armies where, like Sylvanet, who's just like, you're never getting burning on them because they heal at the end of every turn, all of their units. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's not doing anything. And it's more that I'm very bad at rolling 3-ups apparently for this ability. I've just like my first 5 times I rolled a 1 and it's like, okay, yeah, and that's also why I really didn't like that start. But the more I've played against it, it's actually kind of scary to keep it on, but you don't have CP to remove it. Like using a rally on this, especially when you're not underdog, you just don't have the CP to do this. So you're just gonna take the damage whenever they want, or you're gonna be at -1 to wound. So it's it's been better and better the more I've seen it.
Sure, and your point about Sylvaneth is also, kind of we could combine it with the point you just made, which is they are healing at the end, but it means that they're not healing, right? I mean, they're just getting rid of the burning keyword. So even though they're getting full access to it, at least you're stopping them from healing, I guess. So there's something there.
Yeah, but then you stop them healing once, and then in their turn they will heal again, and it's just like the army-wide heal just nullifies it entirely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to some enhancements. So we're going to be talking about the heroic traits first, then the artifacts, and then we've got 2 spell lores, which, if I'm not mistaken, is one of only 2 armies that have 2 spell lores. Is that correct? Does Seraphon have 2?
I think Seraphon only has 1. I think Tzeentch is literally the only army in the game that has 2.
Okay.
I'll check Seraphon, but
sure.
I think they are like one of the only.
Yeah.
One.
Well, it's definitely not Lumineth, so it's either Tzeentch and
Seraphon has 2, yeah.
Okay, all right. And then we've got our own manifestation lore, which I'm curious to see how much value you put in that compared to the morbid conjuration that's floating around. But let's get on to heroic traits first. So we'll be looking at illusionist first. I'll just read the rule, and then Hugo, tell me what you're thinking. So subtract 1 from this. So this is for your any hero, obviously. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target friendly units while they are wholly within this unit's combat range. So that's going to be shooting. If they can shoot in combat, of course, but a lot of units can't. But mostly we're talking about combat. Do I have that right? Let's see. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target friendly units while they are wholly. Yeah.
No, so you have it the other way around, because this subtracts a -1 for hit rolls if they're wholly within combat range of the hero that has it. So if let's say if you have a Lord of Change, if your unit's wholly within 3 of the Lord of Change, then they are going to be -1 to hit. Okay. So it's actually more against shooting than against melee, I found.
Okay, fair. So yeah. Okay, so how good is that, though? Is that worth taking? I mean, how hard is it to keep a unit wholly within 3 inches of the hero?
It's extremely hard, especially melee, because it means that if they are wholly within 3, that means that the enemy can get within 3 and tag them and attack them. So I found this to be better against shooting, because then it's just, you're always going to be on the big chicken, because it means that they are always going to be -1 to hit.
Yeah.
I think this is a fine take. This wouldn't be my first choice, but I think it's fine on a Lord of Change.
Okay. So moving on to Nexus of Fate. In your hero phase, you can activate this and roll a die. You must replace one of your Destiny dice with that roll. And must is interesting. Obviously, you don't have to initiate the ability, but if you don't like the roll you got, then you got to stick with it. Now, you get to choose which die you're going to replace it with, but considering that Battle Shock is gone, I don't know if we really like having low dice anymore in Tzeentch, do we?
No, there is one use, which is the Lord of Change, pitching them. But I think, I really like this, because this is the way you can fish for higher ones, and you can, if you start with 1 6 and 2 5s to get an extra 6 or an extra 5 to get 2 charges, 2 big teleports, I really like this.
What would your kind of mental calculus be for this to kind of say, I'm not going to do it? Say you only had 4s and higher. I'm statistically, you're probably going to roll no better than what you already have. Would you just choose not to use it?
Yeah, then I would choose not to use it. But I've never had that where you only have good stuff. Yeah. But if you have 2, if you have a 4 and a 5 and a 3, I would still always use it just to see if you get the 4 up, because having on 2 dice having 9 is really important for the 9 charges and stuff. And if you don't roll it, it doesn't really matter. It didn't change anything. But overall, I've used it basically every hero phase where it really mattered, which is basically the first 3, and it's been really good.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Okay, and then lastly, Cult Demagogue, which was a popular one back in the last book. It's changed a bit, I guess. It says if each dice in a casting roll for this unit has the same value and the spell is not miscast, so just not double ones, add 3 to the casting roll. So tell us about the kind of how this has changed and what kind of value you think this is giving.
Yeah, so the main thing that has changed is that it used to be that it's automatically cast, cannot be unbound. So that would create a really cool combo with Destiny dice, where you could say take 2/2s and cast a spell like with like casting value 8 or even like 10 or 12 with Blizzard. But now that it's a bonus to the casting roll, it actually doesn't work with Destiny dice because the Destiny dice cannot be modified by friendly abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that basically meant that this thing went from really good to very mediocre. And I've played with this my first couple of games, and I think this is just. I think you never take this. I think the other two are better, and because this is just so situational. The fact that the Lord of Change doesn't change the dice. If the Lord of Change still had swapping the dice, yeah, then this would be an out to take. But yeah, they removed that, and this cannot go on Kairos, so this is just not worth it.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because the statistics or just the probability of rolling doubles is 1 each out of 36 results for each of the 6 results on a die. So that's 6 out of 36, but you're taking the ones out because the ones would be a miscast. So then you're down to 5/36 chance that you actually roll doubles naturally. And then adding 3 to them, if you rolled 2 2s, then you're getting +3 to that. So you're rolling as low as a 7, and maybe if you needed a spell that had a higher casting value, even that one gets pulled out of the distribution of being a good enough roll. So then you're looking at double threes or higher, which is a 4 out of 36 chance, and not so great, 1 out of 9. So I'm with you now that I hadn't read into that you couldn't modify the roll with Destiny dice. So that's pretty rough. Yeah, how the mighty have fallen, I guess, because this was one of the 2 most popular choices, I think, if I'm not mistaken, for command traits back in the 3rd edition book.
Yeah, this was one of the reasons why you took an Arcanite hero, and even like it's even worse chance because double 6, basically nobody can unbind that, so that you don't care about that. Double 5s with the +1, also basically nobody can unbind it. So it's really only good for double 3s and double 4s. Double 2s it's fine, but it's not like amazing. It's basically double 3s, double 4s. Where it matters. But it is kind of funny where you can still say to your opponent that you can get up to like a casting value of like 18 or 19, or it was like 20, the maximum that you could. It's kind of funky. You can get up to like primal dice levels if you roll the double 6 and then with bonuses and yeah. But I don't think this is any good.
Okay, so what are you taking most of the time? The Nexus of Fate?
Yes, my outer one is Nexus of Fate. I think Illusionist could be fine on a Lord of Change, but I think Destiny Dice is the best ability in the book, and getting access to better Destiny Dice, so making your best ability even better and more consistent, that's just my jam.
Nice. Okay, so let's move on to some artifacts. First up will be the Nine-Eyed Tome. It's adding +1 to casting rolls and banishment rolls, but not unbinding. It's always good to keep track of which of the 3 it's doing for any of these abilities to the caster. And that obviously works with magical intervention as well, which would be, countering the -1 to cast in your opponent's turn. Yeah, how are you feeling about this one? And is this what Nine-Eyed Tome used to do, or did it also do unbinds?
Yes, it used to do unbind as well. But I +1 to cast on any of your wizards is really good. It going up to +2 with Kairos's aura just makes everything more reliable. It makes any enemy unbinding way worse. So I think this is really good.
Nice. And how important do you think for banishing? Is this something that you see yourself doing in the games you've played, trying to get rid of endless spells with banishing rolls and giving up one of your casts in order to do so? Or are you more likely to just attack it or ignore it?
No, the banishing is really big because it means that like Purple Sun or Gravetide, which are banished on a 7, I think. Gravetide is at least a 7, but it means that you go from like 50% of the time, like 55 to like 60 something percent. And especially on the characters that can take this are not card rolls, so they're not your amazing caster. So giving up one cast to get rid of one of the endless spells is really good.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, good to know. And yeah, the banishment value for Sun, I just looked it up, is 7. So the same deal.
So going from 7 to 6, it's really, really important.
Of course, on Sun that only does 6 damage, but it doesn't actually banish it, right? But it's still
no. But it's the fact that you can just like do 6 to it. It's like if it's already taken some damage, it means that with a little bit of extra damage, you can take it off. Or I think this is your go-to.
Nice. Okay, so Weird Flame Blade. Now, this one seems nice in the sense that it's interacting with the burning keyword, but I do question how often you're going to be able to make it work with the way our heroes are built and how tanky they are. But it says, if any damage points are allocated to an enemy unit by this unit's combat attacks, that enemy unit has the burning keyword. So it's one of the only other ways you can give it out with, outside of spells that have Weird Flame and shooting attacks. What are we thinking about this? I think one of the lists you sent me actually has this in it, but I was kind of curious about that. It didn't seem like it is as likely or that you'd want to get a unit into combat to be actually dealing this out.
No, I think so. First of all, I hate that still 2 out of 3 of the artifacts require you to be in combat. Why didn't you learn about the last book where 9 out of 12 had to be in combat, where a casting and ranged army stop it? But I think the fact that on a Lord of Change, this can be fine, because the Lord of Change with the sword's actually pretty good in combat, especially if you can give someone like a -1 save, or he's always going to be -1 to hit, and then if you can like apply a burning, I don't mind it. I just dislike that there's basically another melee thing in the ranged army where none of our heroes want to be in combat. That just seems like not something we want to do, and not something the army wants to do. So why make this artifact?
Yeah, that's fair. And if we move on to the other one you're referencing here, once per battle, I always hate these, but any combat phase, so it could be in your opponents as well, pick an enemy wizard in combat with this unit, so whichever hero you put this on, to be the target, inflict D3 mortal damage, at least you don't have to roll for anything. In addition, subtract 1 from casting rolls for the target for the rest of the battle. So I don't know. I mean, you're already pretty good at unbinding. It seems like it's leaning into something you don't really need it to do, plus combined with the fact what you just said about not wanting to get into combat. What are you thinking about this?
Yeah, so if you can trigger this, that means that you have a wizard fighting a wizard. That should never happen. Like, in what world is this happening where either one side is already super losing and they're trying to turn it around, charging their wizard in? That just doesn't work, or that doesn't happen ever where it's going to matter. The -1 to casting. Why is the hero walking out of combat? They're in combat, they should die. Why does the -1 to casting even matter? D3 mortals is, and then once per game in a hero phase, they take D3 mortals, and then for the rest of the phase they're -1 to cast. That would have been pretty good, because then you can, in their important turn, you can deal some mortals, try to snipe him out, make him the -1. But yeah, it's melee. It's on the wizard that has to target a wizard. Just no.
Yeah, you dropped out for a second there, but I think we caught the gist. It just seems like a weird set. So are we going 9-eyed tome 9 times out of 10 here?
I think you almost always go 9-eyed tome, and then unless there's unless you have a combat chicken that you don't mind sending up to front, or you have enough stuff to defend him as well, the blade can be fine. But I think your starting always should be 9-eyed tome.
Okay, fair enough. All right, moving on to spell lores. We got 2, so we're going to start with the lore of Fate. So anyone that's seen any of the spell lores knows that the horizontal one is usually the unlimited one. So let's look at that first, which of course means you can cast it as many times as you have wizards. It goes off on a 7. This is Glimpse the Future. And you set aside any destiny dice that have a value of 6. So they're not up for eligibility here. And roll all of the other dice again. If you have no Destiny dice, roll a die and add it to your Destiny dice. So I guess we can, you mentioned this, there was one way to add dice, but you'd have to have spent everything, right, at that point. How are you feeling about this? Is there some version of reality where you have 3 wizards, you do it once, and you keep filtering until you almost exclusively have sixes, or is that just an unreasonable use of your limited spells that you've got?
It's very unreasonable. There's a couple of main problems with this. It's casting value 7, so it's actually not that easy to cast. If this was like a 6 or a 5, fair enough. It doesn't add any Destiny dice unless you have no, but 1 Destiny dice is basically not useful. 2 are useful. The fact that you have to reroll anything that's not a 6, so you cannot choose, hey, I want to keep my 6s and 5s, or 6s, 5s, and 4s, and reroll the low ones. I think this is just a bad spell, and especially, why is this the unlimited spell? You are never gonna cast this more than maybe once or twice a game. Why is it a limited spell?
Yeah, fair. Okay, so Infernal Gateway, casting value 6. You are picking a visible enemy unit within 12 inches to be the target. You roll either 4 dice or a number of dice equal to the number of Destiny dice you have left, whichever is greater. For each 4 up, inflict a mortal damage. So if you're rolling 4, we're talking about on average 2 mortal wounds. If you're rolling all 9, then we're looking at 4.5. It'll never be on average higher than that. What are you thinking about this? Is it? It's one of the. We don't have as many mortal damage spells, and it's 12 inches away. I don't know if that's too close for comfort. I don't know. Is this a good direct damage spell these days? What are you thinking?
It's just really tough because of how the Monty have fallen. But it's a decent spell. But the problem is you want to use your Destiny dice. You don't want to hoard them. It's 12-inch range, so it's extremely close. Which means that you're already basically in fighting range. So that means that you're never going to be able to get a first hit on someone with this. The fact that this doesn't have Weird Flame, for instance, it's really weird because nothing in the spell lore has Weird Flame. So why isn't Infernal Gateway? Why isn't this a flame spell? I don't know. I don't know. This is just not amazing. It's fine if you can cast it with 7+ Destiny dice. Otherwise, no. Why are we taking this?
Yeah, and you say how the mighty have fallen because this used to be the Warscroll spell for the 2 Lords of Change, Kairos and the regular generic one, which was considerably better. 18 inches? Then you rolled 9 dice, and then every 3 up did a mortal wound. Is that what it was, or did it bracket?
Yeah. No, it was 3 ups and it bracketed, but this just used to be your go-to spell at 18 inches. This spell used to define the 18-inch Tzeentch skill box, and now it's just nothing anymore.
Do you think putting it through Portal is something you would consider, or is it just not worth it?
No, because Portal range is significantly shorter.
Yeah.
Portal range is no longer basically 18 inches. It's now 11 and a bit, and then plus 12. So it went from 36 inches to 21 through the portal,
sure.
And it's way less damage. So it's just nowhere near as good anymore. Which is they removed almost all the mortal damage from spell lords, which is fine. This was clearly a design decision, sure. I just don't think especially the 12-inch makes this horrible. If you had one decent long-range mortal spell, that would have made this lore a lot better, especially compared to what we're going for next, the other lore.
Yeah. If this had been our unlimited spell, would you have been tempted to take this spell lore?
Maybe, because if this was the unlimited spell, this would have been actually pretty good unlimited spell, because they charge into your horrors, and then you give them 8 to 12 mortals. That would have been pretty good. Yeah, I think if this was the unlimited spell and Glimpse wasn't, and this had the Weird Flame keyword, I think this lore wouldn't have been bad. No, but currently it's the first 2 spells not looking great.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look at Shield of Fate. Defensive spell here, 7 casting value. You're picking a friendly unit holier than 18. The target has 5-up ward until the start of your next turn. In addition, if you have 4 or more Destiny dice left, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target that unit until the start of your next turn. That would be combat and shooting attacks. Seems kind of similar to what it's always been, I guess. It's definitely got the vibe. How are you feeling about how it's changed, and do you think it's enough to make up for all the complaints you have about the other 2 spells in this lore?
So yeah, this has gotten better actually than it used to be, because this used to be basically a 5 board, and when you had like 3 to 6 or 4 plus Destiny dice left. There have been a couple of changes which has made this worse. So basically, everybody has a 6-up ward from the demons. So the most things you would want to protect, like a big unit of horrors or one of the chickens, already has a ward. And the chickens now have a 5-up ward base, so they don't care about this. One funky interaction that I tried for 2 games is that because this is cast on a friendly unit, you can put this on an allied mercenary Gargant, and then have a Gargant with a 5 ward and -1 to hit. I tried this for 2 games, wasn't any good, but it's just like there's some funny interactions you can do with that, or like another Regiment of Renown. It's a good spell. It's just one good spell doesn't make a good spell lore.
Sure. And then same question, if this was the unlimited spell, would you consider this lore good enough to take?
Yeah. Maybe, but you usually only need it on one place. Like on one place you really want it. Second spot is nice, but this doesn't really fix what the problems have been in the other. Basically, in the from the casting, it's just there's no damage output there, and this doesn't help that. And that's why if Inferno Gateway was the unlimited spell, that would actually give you a decent amount of damage output. So I don't think this would have made it much better.
Yeah, the funny thing is, this whole thing, all 3 of these are clearly based off of your Destiny dice pool. And the weird thing is that both of the 2 spells that aren't unlimited require you to have 4 or more, but there's no way to get back to 4 once you commit to losing, going below that. Because, like you said, Glimpse the Future only adds 1 if you're down to 0. And so I feel like it should say if you have 3 or less, you can go up to 4 or up to max 4, so that you can get back to where these other 2 need you to be actually be enjoying the buffs. It doesn't seem like it really synergizes very well with itself. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's also one of the things where it's like, yeah, okay, this is clearly a lore that cares about Destiny dice, but Destiny dice, as I said before, are by far your most powerful ability you have, so you want to use your ability. And then having the glimpse it's kind of fine, but then always having to keep 4 Destiny dice doesn't make glimpse any better, because you're gonna have like 4 to 5 good Destiny dice usually. So glimpse doesn't do much because you need to have the 4. It's and even if you have 4, Gateway doesn't care if you have 4 or if you have 2, but Shield of Fate really does. And that's also, I don't know. This entire lore just seems like, oh, let's do some random Destiny dice stuff, but didn't make it all fit together.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, Gateway would be, it's always trying to get higher than 4, so it's only Shield of Fate that really wants to hit that threshold. Okay, well, let's move on to the good lore, spell lore of the Lore of Change. So our unlimited and also Weird Flame keyword spell is Bolt of Tzeentch, which used to be Arcanite and Demon. It was the one spell that was shared between the 2 lores. It used to do D6. Now, for a casting value 6 and range of 18, it does D3 mortal damage, but does count as a Weird Flame spell. And of course, you can spam it by having casting it once per each one of your wizards if you really want. How are you feeling about this?
This entire lore is amazing, and this spell is super good. I was very down on it at first, but the fact that you can still do 4 to 8 mortal damage on the target, it's really good. It's 18 inches, which makes it even better. It's a casting value 6, so it's actually not too difficult to get off. I think this is really good.
Yeah, it seems like it. Cities also has a similar unlimited spell that can do mortal damage repeatedly. Seems like it's a strong build to be able to do that, especially considering how hard it is to get mortal damage out these days.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at Fold Reality for casting value 7, you're picking a visible, friendly Disciples of Tzeentch unit holier than 12, and then removing the target from the battlefield and setting it up again outside of 9. So it's just a teleport spell, and it doesn't have to be outside of combat, do they? The target unit.
Nope, they don't. You can pull stuff out of combat.
That's pretty amazing.
This is just so good. This is so good. This alone. A teleport spell alone would make this lore good. But the unlimited spell is good, and the spell we're going to talk about in a second is super amazing. So, like, this spell lore is hitting on all cylinders. It's really good on every way.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Ideneth has a similar thing, but it's casting value 6 and is unlimited. You can't give everyone everything, but of course, you have casting bonuses in this army, and the theme of the army is not necessarily teleporting around, but it's still really strong, even if it's just 1 unit per turn, or 2 for battle round if you want, I guess, with magical intervention.
Yes, like that. That's also one of the big things. Being able to, in the enemy turn, teleport, let's say, Kairos back into your line, or teleporting one of your screens to like cover a different part, or in the enemy doing medical intervention and casting this, because even Kairos needs 1/4 on his dice, and if he has even 1 bonus, he only needs a 3 on his dice. Let's say if he's next to a place of power, he needs 1/3 on his dice, which just suddenly just like turns this on like nobody's business.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty amazing. Okay, and then transform to spawn. This is you've got a lot to say about this, but I'll cover it real quick. And I will say in short, I think it's really weird that they chose to make a whole war scroll dependent on choosing a specific spell lore, but we'll get more into it in a sec. So you're picking a visible enemy unit within 12 inches. You're doing D3 mortal damage, so yet more direct damage. If any models are slain, so it's probably best into small health characteristic units so that you can guarantee that you get a spawn out of it. Pick a friendly chaos spawn of Tzeentch unit that is set in reserve as a potential fate or that has been destroyed. If you picked a unit that's in reserve as a potential fate, set it up on the battlefield in combat with the target. If you picked a unit that's been destroyed, set an identical replacement unit on the battlefield in combat with the target. There's a lot of subtlety here, so Hugo, I'm going to let you just take it away.
All right. This is the best spell in the entire book. This is just super good in combination with the magical intervention. So D3 mortals, that's pretty good. But the best thing is the chaos spawn. In the previous book, setting up a spawn was one of the best things we could do. But realistically, we were very tied into basically only doing it in your turn unless we had the sigil. But now you can do it in enemy turn, and they've relaxed some of the constraints of setting up these spawn. That means that you can deal D3 mortal damage to a unit in front, and then you can tag a unit 8 inches behind. Because it's 3 inches combat range, it's a 50mm base, so that's basically 2 inches, and then 3 inches for the other combat range. So anything within 8 inches of that unit can be tagged in combat. And now that shooting combat is basically non-existent, stopping movements, stopping shooting, stopping charging, this is just extremely good. And like you can do so many interesting plays with this. I don't know. This alone would make this lore amazing. But the fact that you also have the teleport and also have the good limit spell just like makes this entire lore just an auto pick compared to the lore of Fate.
Now, obviously, you have 2 lores, and most people only have 1. I guess having one that's this strong and then having another one that's just really lackluster kind of makes it just feel like, you're back to what everyone else has. In what world do you take the other spell lore? Is there any world?
No, I don't think so. No, I think the fact that you have a teleport spell with Destiny dice, because that's also one of the things you have to think about. It's not just a teleport outside of 9. No, it's a teleport where you can say, I'm always making this charge. So people have to screen way differently against that. People have to screen way differently against the transform to spawn. So that's the difference. The fact that the Bolt of Tzeentch is a Weird Flame spell also means that you can trigger your Weird Flame way easier. I just don't ever see a reason to play with Lore Fate. I tried it. It's just not worth it.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's take a look at the manifestations before we get out of the whole spell casting realm. I've got Tome of Eyes up first. It's got a casting value 5. And you set it up holier than 12 of the caster. So then it's got this ability. I didn't put the stats for how tough it is, except for the demonic simulacrum, just because I didn't think it was super necessary. But anyway, its ability is as a reaction to you declaring a spell ability for a wizard within its combat range, so within 3 inches, you can add 1 or 2 to the casting roll for that spell. Roll a number of dice equal to the amount added. For each 1 or 2, allocate 1 damage point to the caster. If the caster is destroyed by this ability, the spell has no effect. What are you thinking about this? Is this, forget that Morbid Conjuration exists for a minute, or even any of the generic ones. If we're just looking at this in a vacuum, how is this spell?
This is good. Because of the way that reactions and that works, reactions happen after you fully complete the declare step. And in the declare step of casting a spell is the rolling. So you see what you roll before you decide what you want to add. So let's say you need a 7, you've rolled a 6. You can say, oh, I'll add 1, and then I'll get this. That makes it extremely versatile as a just guaranteeing your spells go off. It's only because it uses an ability. It's only once per turn, so that makes it a little bit worse. And it's combat range, so it also means that you have to be really close to it, and it has to stay basically anchored to 1 or 2 wizards. But the effect is just supremely good.
Okay. Yeah. So. What did it used to do? It helped you cast the Parchment Curse or something like that?
Yeah, but it used to basically be reroll casting. That's why you took it. It was 40 points. It gave you reroll casting, and you chucked it on Kairos, and then he became one of the best casters in the game. This is still really good. It's not as great on Kairos, but it's really good on a normal chicken or having I think this is just a very solid for a caster army to have.
Okay, nice. All right, well, let's look at the next one. That would be the Burning Sigil. I feel like this one's fallen quite a bit. I used to be quite a fan of the Burning Sigil, especially my Flamers list. And I think in our very first game, we both had sigils up at the same time against each other, which is pretty fun.
Yeah.
So, casting value 5, you're setting up the sigil holier than 12 of the caster. And then in any movement phase, so including that of your enemy, this manifestation must use this ability. Pick each unit, friendly and enemy, within 9 to be the targets. Roll 2 dice, and then you, as the person who casts this thing, get to pick either result. Then apply the corresponding effect to all targets for the rest of the turn. On a 1 or 2, has no effect. So I suppose there's a 33% chance... Well, on one roll that you get that, we'd have to do the math on the way it combines out. But anyway, that you could at least choose this if you don't like the other stuff that would be happening to your friendly units. But option 3 is subtract 2 inches from the target's move characteristic. 4 is subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks, including shooting. 5 is subtract 1 from wound rolls for the attacks, same thing. And 6 would be inflicting D3 mortal damage on the target, then adding 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's melee weapons. All right, so maybe first off, walk us through if it's going to hit some of your friendly units. What are we looking for here? If you have to choose, are we going for 6 because it at least boosts you? Or would you rather just go for no effect if you know you're going to have a certain number of enemy or friendly units get hit?
I don't even know what I would do because this thing is so bad. I've never cast it. I don't know what they were thinking when they were making this, because the fact that you this is meant to be a debuff thing, where it's you put it out there, and then you try and debuff the enemy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work, because it half of the time doesn't do what you want it to do. Like -2 move, it's like the 3 individual debuffs, they're very good, but it's not reliable. The setup is 12 inches, which makes it so awkward.
Yep.
If the setup was 18, maybe to like you could like magical intervention this and then like try to do some stuff, but subtract 2 from the move characteristic in the enemy turn doesn't matter because they've already moved. So that doesn't matter. And then in your turn, it doesn't matter to subtract 2 from the target's move characteristic because it's not their turn, so they're not going to use their move characteristic. So that doesn't work. Yeah. So half of the stuff doesn't work. And then the -1 to hit and -1 to wound is pretty good. But if I want to use it on myself, I have to fish for the 6. And then if I don't get a 6 and I don't get a 1 or a 2, what are we doing? I'm basically just like debuffing myself.
Yeah.
A +1 attack is really good. It's like on Zangor, it's really good, going from 2 to 3 attacks. But you can never reliably use this.
Yeah.
This is somewhere again where like the number 3, like, did you actually test this and think about how this would actually play in game? No.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe there's a version of reality where you don't care about it hitting your units because your units are just meant to chaff it up, just be there to absorb wounds like pinks or blues or something. You're not really worried about the output, but you are worried about their output. I suppose that's a thing. The movement thing is real interesting, what you said. That seems like an obvious oversight. What if a Chaos Spawn was still attached to 6 here? Would you be as big a fan of it, considering that you'd have multiple sources of creating a Chaos Spawn, or would you think it's not enough to compensate for the rest of the unreliability or kind of questionable utility?
I don't know, because it's 12-inch setup range, and like, yeah, Chaos Spawn are super good, but I don't know if I would still like it, because the other debuffs, like the -1 to hit, you basically in the build you want this, which is the horror build, you get this from the Lord of Change. Yeah. The -1 to wound in the build, you get this from the subfaction. If you ever need it in a pinch, you have Kairos who can apply both to a unit. So it all just doesn't seem to, like, this does all stuff that either doesn't work or is doing stuff we already get in better ways. So yeah, why right. would you ever use it? And this is random, so you cannot plan it. Sometimes it just does nothing. If you want to buff your own units, you're basically like fishing for 1/6 on 2 dice, which is very rare. Like, it's, or at least not good enough that you can plan around. And then if you want to fish for the +1 attack, and then you get like a 5 and a 4. So now instead your Zangor like -1 to hit or -1 to wound, and you're like, okay, why did I ever try this?
Right. For those that don't know what I was referencing, the reason I mentioned a Chaos Spawn is because it used to create Chaos Spawns if it did damage to 1 unit per turn. But yeah, obviously, how the mighty have fallen, I guess. I used to love the Sigil before, but it's just not very good anymore. Okay, and then looking at the last one, the actual moving one, the Demonic Simulacrum is cast on a 7. Set up Holy Then 12, outside 9, which is pretty typical. 8 health, 6 up save, and a 6 up ward, if I'm not mistaken. 9-inch move. It's got a melee profile that's got 4 attacks, 4s, 3s, 1 rend, D3 damage. And then it gets a little more rend if it's against a wizard. But I can tell you right now, it's just not doing a ton. I think it comes out to 2 2/3 damage before taking into account the rend. In the save. Anyway, its passive ability is while this manifestation's attacks target a wizard, add a number equal to that wizard's power level to the damage characteristic of this unit's snapping jaws. When we sat down to talk about this a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, you said it's Mimi, kind of a joke against Nagash, of course, because he's a 9-level wizard. You're getting some serious damage profile out there. What are some of the other wizards that would be the ones we really want to look at? Like Teclis, I guess, is a 4. Is Croak a 4 or 3? I don't know off the top of my head.
Croak's, I think, still 4, but Nagash is the only one who's ever going to be on the front line, because the other ones are always going to be guarded and stuff. its damage output is laughable if you compare it against anything of the good stuff. Like it's just absolutely bad.
Yeah.
Or like an incarnate, or I don't know. The adding the wizard level, it's funny, but it's never going to do anything.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It almost feels sometimes that the predatory, sorry, I should just say the moving endless spells that they wrote for the generic set of spells were written by a different set of writers than those that were made for the factions. Like I've heard that there are some faction endless spell collections that are actually decent in the manifestation lores, but thus far, I just comparing to Morbid Conjuration or even some of the other options we've got, like the Primal one, just seems like those are the better choices. What version of the world are you taking the Tzeentch, the manifestation lore? Only if the other ones get nerfed?
And this gets significantly buffed.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you said that the tome doesn't even move, I had to look it up. I thought it moved, but no, it doesn't move. So that makes it even worse. So that actually makes tome, very mid, because it means that you have to use one spell. Basically, Kairos has to cast this and then set it up in combat range for another caster to maybe get his spell off. But then why didn't you use the spell that Kairos used to cast this to cast a good spell? I don't know. The fact that I thought that tome still moved, that's bad. The Sigil just needs an entire rewrite. The Simulacrum just needs its damage to go up, and I like give it like +1 or +2 damage against against wizards, or like make it like damage 2 and then double its damage against manifestations, or like against wizards, because that's on some other armies, and there's like it's still going to be doing some damage into anything else, but then you can use that as a real like wizard hunter.
Yeah, the Sylvaneth endless spells, they've got that worm that can teleport outside of whatever of a wizard to go hunt a wizard. Which, if this had that, I'd be much more, thinking it could do some work. But you're right. Most of them are going to be protected anyway, and castled up and with some screens. Okay, so let's move on to the Warscroll breakdown. You chose 6 different units here. I don't have enough of a dog in the fight yet with Tzeentch to choose anything, and I trust your experience. I put them kind of in order, some kind of logical order here. We got Kairos and the regular Lord of Change. Then we got the Chaos Spawn, which I know is like a big fave of yours. Then we've got kind of our Zongors section, which is the Shaman, the regular Zongors, and then Skyfires. So we'll start with Kairos. Kairos is 440 points. Obviously, he's unique. He's a 3-caster wizard with +1 to cast bubble, +1 cast and unbind bubble, holier than 12 inches. And he still has the ability to make his lowest d6 match the highest for casting. His Warscroll spell is Arcane Suggestion, which is amazingly powerful modular spell, which used to be in the Arcanite lore and is now just tied to him. So it makes his value skyrocket, even though everything he's got is good, really. And he's got a once per battle tactic shenanigan that I'll let you explain a bit more in detail in a second. And then I said, why pick this unit? He can take the whole army, excluding the Arcanite Italics heroes, which is pretty great. He's an incredible spell platform, especially for getting manifestations out, and of course his own Warscroll spell. And then I said, don't underestimate the battle tactic once per battle. I really feel like breaking the fourth wall like that in the game and having control over that is, especially in certain situations, just invaluably strong. So that's my summary. Hugo, take it away. What are you thinking about Kairos?
Kairos is probably the best scroll in the book. He is just amazing. I've heard from like multiple people that don't play Tzeentch say, yeah, he's broken, which is, yeah, he's so good. 3 casting is really good, but not just 3 casting. 3 casting with probably one of the still best, basically big hero casting bonuses with change the lowest to the highest, and then a +1 for everybody around him. So he's not only making his casting better, because that also applies to him, but also makes everybody else around him better. As you said, Arcane Suggestion is absolutely bonkers. It's the fact that it's not just one debuff, because if it would be either one of the 3 debuffs, it would have been good. The fact that you can choose, so you can mix and match when you need it, makes it so you have any answer for the right situation. Do you need someone to stop you from countercharging? Oh, yeah, I stopped that. Do you need like someone's big hammer is coming in and you need to like blunt them? Okay, might as well hit a wound. Do you need to like do some big punch with like flamers or Zangor? Mine's on save. It's just amazing what he does, and it's 18 inches.
Yeah.
It's not 12 inches. They didn't nerf the range.
Yeah.
So basically, one of the two reasons you took an Arcanite hero in the previous book, they put it on him. And that's just pure gas.
Yeah.
And then his battle tactic is also really good. So what does it do? Whenever you pick a battle tactic, you can do one of two things. You can either say, "Hey, I'm going to complete the tactic I've already completed the second time," so that just makes your in a situation where the amount of tactics that are good is limited, it smooths that out. Or you can say, "Hey, I'm going to try 2 tactics and only have to complete 1," and the other one just goes back into the pool.
Yeah.
So in a situation where someone has abilities to like stop you from doing a tactic in an extremely close game, but you have enough tactics to do the entire game, you can like, "Hey, try and stop both of the tactics. Good luck." That's just pure gas. He is amazing. He just does everything you want and more. I think you start any list with the Lord of Change and him, and after that you see, what do I want to do?
Wow, because that's an 800-point investment, right, with the two of them?
No, not the Lord of Change, and the Lore of Change.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Fair enough. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Now, I just think he is pure gas.
And I guess since he's probably the best for casting those manifestations, are you taking Morbid Conjuration every time?
Every time.
Yeah.
That's also one of the reasons why he's even better, because he's a 3-caster who can actually get those Morbid Conjurations out. Like, he doesn't care. He will throw them out all day. He's also one of the things that he can take anything in the book, which makes your list building much easier. Like him and the normal Lord of Change and the Gun Summoner can take anything, but because he is so good and he opens up list building, that makes him even better. Because you can go either way, and that's one of the things I'm glad for, because not all Chaos armies, the big main characters or like the big greater demons, cannot take everything.
Yeah. I mean, so I did compute his damage output. Not that that's the reason we're taking him, but for those of you out there that haven't seen my graphs here, this is against a 6-up down to a 2-up save, and then we've got a separate column for expected value average, which is just taking a flat average of those 5 values, especially considering all-out defense is a little less common and save stacking is way less common. It's not unreasonable to think that averaging them out is decent. His base profile is in blue. And then with the spell, Arcane Suggestion for -1 save, functionally giving him extra rend, is in orange. So we're looking at somewhere around 5 to 6-ish against 6-ish damage against the average target. But that's obviously not why we're taking him. How often have you seen him in combat?
He's gone into combat often enough where I know his profile by heart. I don't know Flamer melee profile. I don't know if he's a small foot hero profile, but I know his melee profile because he is actually someone I am more willing to send into combat because he does a little bit of more damage. And like to finish off something or just to do the extra bit of damage where you need it. And like if then, he's in a bad position. I just teleport him out in your turn.
Yep. Yeah, I scaled his chart here, if I'm not mistaken, to the 2 different versions of the regular Lord of Change, so we can kind of see where he's sitting. There's a more melee build and a more shooty build, and he's kind of in between the two in terms of output. So, yeah. Anyway, he's what is he? 16 wounds, 5-up save, 5-up ward. Is that right?
Yeah. So he lost one point of save, which is relevant. It's actually quite relevant. But he gained a 5 ward. And the 1 point of save is mainly relevant because of the interaction with Destiny dice. Destiny dice don't benefit from like bonuses to your save. So you used to be able to like a rend 2 damage 6, like Cannonball or like Morathi with the tail, or like any of those like one attack weapons, you just, oh, here I have a 6, I save it. And now you can no longer do that, which is relevant against those targets, but just always getting flat 5 of ward, it's real good.
Yeah. Yeah, Jonas has talked a lot about our what's happened to Techless, and he's now on a 5-up save too. But I mean, yeah, granted, Kairos is a good bit cheaper than Techless. How would you compare the two? I mean, they're roughly as tanky as one another. Is there? I don't know if you know Techless's current Warscroll as well.
But... Yeah, I've played against him quite a lot. Okay, actually.
What do you think?
I think so. Pure points for points, Kairos is better. Pure points for points, Kairos is the best caster in the game, and it's not even close. Because he has like such a good spell, and he's still an amazing caster, and he just does so much for the rest of the army. I still think Techless is like overall better caster because he can guarantee on a 10 the casting rolls, and he can shut down anything on an 8, and he still has like a good spell. And I think, but yeah, he is 150 points or something extra, but he's not 150 points better. But I still think Techless is a decent Warscroll, but you don't see him as much because Lumineth overall is just super good, so he has to compete for a spot.
Sure.
Whereas Kairos is by far the best scroll in the book, so he doesn't have to compete for a spot. So you basically always see him.
Do you expect Kairos' price to go up?
Yes, kind of. We're gonna have a little bit have to see what the results are, but the first results is that Tzeentch is actually one of like the top 5 armies, which I didn't expect, but it's like a combination of having probably 2 cheap horrors and then the morbid conjuration. But I suspect that he might get hit because he is by far like he's in every list. So if Tzeentch is overall too good, you can up his points and then he will still be good. Like if he goes to like 460 or even like 470, I'm starting to like I don't know, but like 460, I still like almost always take him.
Sure. Okay, well, let's move on to his brother, if you will, the Lord of Change. Obviously, one advantage of the Lord of Change is that he can take artifacts and heroic traits, as you've referenced it a number of times. He's one of the cheapest Greater Demons, if I'm not mistaken, if not the cheapest, at 360 points for a 2-cast wizard, but has no casting bonuses unless he's standing around Kairos, which is a huge nerf, in my opinion. He has an ability to trade Destiny Dice for half demon units, like one Destiny Dice to bring back half of a destroyed demon unit, rounding up, I guess. He's also got a holier than 12-inch -1 to hit in combat for demon units standing around him. His Warscroll spell is kind of swingy, weird flame mortal damage. It's Tzeentch's Firestorm, if I'm not mistaken. You roll 9 dice, every 6 does D3 mortal damage. And then I said, why pick this unit? Well, he can, just like Kairos, can take the whole army, basically. He's got this resurrection mechanic for demons, which I think has some value as long as you've got the Destiny Dice to be thrown away. And he's got a decent Warscroll spell for extra mortal damage in the army. How are you feeling about him?
Yeah, so for everybody who knows what he was, keep his remove that from your brain. He's completely different, and he does something completely different. He is basically your new summoning, or in this case, it's the recursion. You see this on a lot of the like big heroes who have like on their 4-up you get half a unit back. For Tzeentch, you discard the Destiny Dice, which is much better, because this means you can basically get like 4 units back during the game, because you're usually not going to lose a unit turn 1, so turn 2 onwards, you're getting a unit back. And then he has the old Locust, which is the -1 to hit aura in combat, which is also really good. So that in combination with the -1 to wound from the Weird Flame host means that you can get almost any target on -1 to hit and wound. I think he is really good. I think he is okay. I think he's really good if you take the full-on horror build and you're just there with just a whole bunch of wounds and that. Outside of that, you don't take him. He's just there for demon recursion and demon -1 to hit, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he's a 2-caster, but without those buffs, you know, it's just there's better ways to get two casts with your other casters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at his damage output. So this is his shooting version, the Rod of Sorcery version. In blue is the ranged output, which we're seeing an expected value average of about 2 wounds. So nothing really all that exciting, but it has swing potential because it's 2d6 attacks. And then his melee, if he is not versus a wizard, just base, is the orange, and that's coming out to just below 4, probably 3.5 or so. And then melee against a wizard would pop it over 4 on average across all saves. Nothing really particularly exciting. As I said, this version, obviously you've got more range than Kairos or than the melee version with the ranged attack, but it's really not. The output is less than all three. It's the least of all three. If we look at the next slide, however, we're looking at the sword version, and this is scaled. If I go back and forth between them, you can see they're scaled on the same 12, being the top of the ceiling there, and you can see that this one has much better melee output because it's got a relatively punchy weapon, the sword that ends up kicking in here. With, again, base or versus wizard, the base is looking at something like about 6 1/4, 2/3 or something damage against all saves averaged out. And then with against a wizard, it's looking at a 7 and some change or something. Now, what is your preferred choice here? Would you rather take the shooting attack just to have something if he's standing in the back line, or would you rather go for the melee output?
No, you always go melee output.
Okay.
Because the shooting is so little. Like doing 2 damage to a 4-up save just doesn't matter. But being able to like go in melee and do like 7, 8, 9 damage, and especially like it's a bit swingy. But if you swing up, it's really good. Like just being able to clean up units. That's what his job is in melee. Then it's just like, oh, you have 5 5 steel helms, or like 2 Chaos Warriors, or like something like that, where he can realistically go in, kill them, remove a resource, like fully remove a resource from your opponent, without really getting hit back.
Yep. Okay. All right, so our next unit was the Chaos Spawn, your favorite. I'll cover it real quick, then you can fill in some of the other stuff here. 60 points, so it's kind of a tax in order to be able to turn on the spell. He starts in reserve and is only summoned by Transform to Spawn in the lore of Change. He's great for tying up units, as you've already covered. And then why pick this unit? He's a cheap points filler, so I suppose if instead of seeing his attacks, you can be like, well, there's a lot of lists these days where I have a hard time filling up more than those last 60 points or whatever, so why not? But that said, I'm assuming you're starting your list with those 60 points built in, so it's kind of a moot point. Great control tech in both your turn and your opponent's. And then a warning, I said this, he's literally useless if you choose Lore of Fate, because there's no way to pull it, or if the other lore, you literally can't put him on the table even. So that's just a little extra point there. Hugo, take it away. Why did you want to put this in the top 6 Warscrolls you want to talk about?
Okay, yeah, so like I said, just start with Kairos and the lore of change. These two also start your list. So your list is 1,500 points, because 500 points is taken up by these two. He is your control piece that you kind of need to have to just like stop enemy charges and to control where what is going, stop shooting. He is just really good. One of the things that is a bit annoying is that because he's not a demon and he's not an arcanite, he can only go in a battalion with either one of the 2 chickens or a gun summoner, because he's a beast and doesn't have any other attack. So that's a bit annoying. But you usually have spots in there where it doesn't really matter that much. Just the amount of control this guy gives you, and the amount of utility and forcing your opponents to do stuff they don't want to do and stopping stuff, it's just amazing. And you need to start your list basically with this guy. If you don't, I don't know. Like, I seriously don't know why. Because he is so essential to the current playstyle. Even in the Zangor heavy build, I need him to stop countercharges, basically.
Yeah, we talked about this before, especially for people that have multiple chaos spawns because of the way you used to be able to summon multiple of them. Is there any reason for those people out there that want to use two to do so? I mean, like magical intervention, and if they haven't killed the first one in your turn, so if you're getting 10 attempts at making these guys, I guess, is there any version of reality where you'd put two in the list and pay 120 points?
No, because he basically, I've only ever seen him be cast and then survive the turn, and that was because my opponent retreated him out so he could take an objective in my backfield. That's the only time he's ever survived more than like a single turn, because you put him in combat, so people have to use their fight abilities on him, and he's 5 wounds on a 5-up save, so he is going to die. And people want their units out of combat, so it's. I don't think you ever pay more than you get more than one.
Yeah, I guess if it was an unlimited spell, then we'd have a conversation. But
yeah.
Okay, cool. So I didn't put his damage in there, so we'll go straight to the Zangor Shaman. At 160 points, we're on the Arcanite side of things now. It's a 1-level wizard, 14-inch move. The discs used to be 16, if I'm not mistaken, but a lot of cavalry saw a 2-inch reduction throughout the game. He can give run and shoot / charge to Warflock non-flying units, if I'm not mistaken. And
non-flying.
Yeah, which would be everything but the Enlightened on Disc and Skyfires, and of course himself. And then he potentially resurrects Zangor end of any turn, which seems to be really strong. I said, why pick this unit? I said has amazing synergy with the strongest melee build, which would be your Zangor heavy stuff. He's bringing more than one of these still has utility, which I'll let you explain more fully. And of course, he's quite fast and mobile for battle tactics and making sure that he's within the bubbles to keep resurrecting those guys and giving those buffs out. So take it away. What are we using 2 of these guys for?
Okay, so if you're building like basically anything more than 10 normal Zangor, you're using one of these. The run and charge, it's super good because it allows you to, it opens your threat range from 18 to 24 inches. He's like that alone makes him good, but his second ability is probably the best ability he has, which is at the end of any turn. It's a bit funky, but what you basically do is the enemy unit has to be within 12 of you. If the enemy unit is in combat with a Zangor unit, which is that's no longer a keyword that all the Zangor have, because that's now Warflock. It's literally the 10-foot dudes. That's a Zangor. So are they in combat with them? You roll D3, and then on the 2-up, you inflict that many mortal damage, and you return that many slain models. Not how much enemy models you kill, not anything. You just do the roll. So on a 3 on the D3, you deal 3 mortal damage, and you return 6 wounds worth of Zangor. That is so good. And it's not end of any turn once per army. It's end of any turn. So if you have 2 shamans, they can both do the effect. They can both target the same enemy unit, and they can both pick the same friendly unit. So you can you could effectively return 12 wounds to a Zangor unit, which makes them way harder to deal with. And the way this build or the way that the Zangor then function is that they are 40 wounds. They're only on the 5-up save, but doing 40 wounds is actually really hard for most hammers. Most of them like cap out at like 20, 25.
Yeah.
Which means that you remove 11, 12 Zangor, and then on average you get like 4 back at least, which meant that they only killed 8 of them. And then if you're not in combat, it means you got this. If you're not in combat, it means you get the rally as well, so you get another 3 to 4 back. So then they traded their 200, 300 point hammer for half a unit of Zangor that you keep bringing back.
Yeah.
It's amazing. This dude has got such a big glow up. He is. In my Zangor heavy build, I'm running 2 of these because they're just so good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, what he used to do was just bring, like, the spell did damage and brought it back to Zangor unit in the neighborhood, right? But like you've always been a fan of Zangor, but now they seem to be. We'll talk about them momentarily, but they seem to be a much better option at this point. I don't know. Let's go into that, and then you can kind of talk about all the synergy with the rest of the stuff. So I didn't do the Shaman's output either because I didn't think it was really all that necessary to talk about. But the regular Zongors for 10, for 150 points, you're getting 10 of them. Where they each have 2 health, which is really strong, and then decent weight of dice for what you're getting. So they've got a great combo of just wounds that you gotta soak up or whatever, plus throwing out some good weight of dice. They have exploding hits when wholly within enemy territory. They can get run and shoot, run and charge. I guess I should take shoot out of the equation here, but run and charge from Shaman. They're potentially being resurrected, as we just mentioned. The core, they're basically the core of the strongest melee build in Disciples of Tzeentch. They're super efficient for their points costs. I wouldn't be surprised if their points went up a bit. They're fast and mobile, and of course they can keep returning. So Hugo, tell us a little bit about your journey with Zongors over the 2 editions thus far. And obviously, something else that's different about this unit is what the banners do and all those cool little tricks that they had. That's kind of gone now, but it seems like you're still a pretty big fan of Zongor. So walk us through it a bit.
Yeah, so I've always liked Zangor. In the last local 1-day tournament over here, I basically ran Uppsal Zangor. I ran Kairos and then just a whole lot of Zangor, which was super fun. I have 50 of these painted. I have 6 discs painted. I love them. They changed a bit. When I first saw their new scroll, I kind of was disappointed because they lost quite a bit in their damage output, and that's where they used to shine. They used to shine as a supplemental piece to your mortal wound output from your spells, where they had a whole bunch of attacks at no rend damage 1 to clear out stabas and clear out like all the low armor save stuff where your mortal wounds would take care of the high save stuff. That's gone. They fill an entirely different function now. They are now just a super wound dense a unit with recursion where a sneaky amount of the damage, I think it's like 65% of the damage, is in the 8 great weapons. Because they changed the great weapons used to be a mathematical damage loss, but now they're just flat damage 2. So they're going from damage 1 to damage 2. This means that if you have 20 of them, that means that you can lose 8 of them, or you can lose 12 of them, and only lose like a quarter, or like a third of your damage output.
Oh, wow.
It's really, really, really good. And then if you get like crit 2 hits, then there's suddenly you have 16 attacks, which are very easily going to go to 3s and 3s. -1 base, but you can easily get that up. I've gotten them to rend 4 before, or effective rend 4. Damage 2. And then so in combination with your recursion, and means that they're fairly good against shooting, because shooting will kill like 8. You don't care. Against most melee threats, you don't care. They will kill 10. You still have your 8 great blades. You will punish them super hard. I think this is such a good unit, especially in a block of 20. I started my list with 3x20. I'm now down to 2x20 and 1x10 in the full Zangor build, just because I needed some other stuff in there. But they are all gas. I think they are super good.
Yeah, so just for the record, how'd you get over to -4? So they have 1 built in, Purple Sun, Arcane Suggestion, and what was the 4th one?
The 4th one is the anti-X from the Honor Guard rules from the from the GHB. So I got into Dawn Riders. I went in with damage with rend 4.
Yeah. Okay. So I computed the damage here. This is just for 10 Zongors on foot, as I like to name them if there are other units that have the Zongor word in their title. But anyway, so their base outputs in blue, as always. The expected value average for just 1 unit with no buffs is just over 6. And then I've framed these as +1 to hit a certain number of times because they have their crit 2 hits, which mathematically is the same thing as +1 to hit. And of course, stacks with +1 to hit like with all out attack, or with the marker light ability we'll see on the Skyfires shortly, where they can get +1 to hit in combat against a certain unit. So it's basically getting them functionally up to +2 on that profile. So if we look at getting both those buffs off, we're up to, just for a unit of 10 of these guys, about almost just shy of 11 damage, which is pretty good for 150 models worth and 150 points worth of models at obviously 20 wounds. And then, of course, if you're taking them in a big block of 20, we're almost doubling it. Of course, you don't have the champ attack added to that. But really good output. They're quite efficient per 100 points, which is another one of the metrics I like to use. Is there anything else you want to throw into the conversation while we're still looking at the output here on screen?
Yeah, so I as I said before, most of this damage is in the great weapons, and that's why the reinforcing them is so good. So you can take a hit, keep most of your damage, and then with the buffs you can layer onto them, like either going to like 3s and 2s with the honor guard buff, or like 3s and 3s with they're just like super versatile. They're good into almost any profile, into any defensive profile. They are, yeah, I think they are just super gas.
Yeah. Really convincing me to maybe get started with my Zongor finally. I think I've got like 20, I don't remember what I've got, probably 30 or 40, but I've never actually painted them because I just was playing other builds. But I'll have to follow the Hugo lead here, maybe try out your list and see how it works. Okay, let's wrap it up with talking about the Skyfires. This is a unit of 3 for 170 points, which is the same points cost and number of models as Morsar Guard, and they also have 4 health, 4 up save, 14-inch move. So very similar. Of course, they shoot, and that's a big difference. They have an 18-inch threat range, with the shooting itself plus their movement, which is pretty great. They ignore negative modifiers to hit and wound when they're shooting. And I've said that this is like a 40k reference, but it's just what I like to think of it as: a marker light for combat attacks for Warflock. So basically, anything they did damage to with their shooting attacks gives other Warflock, well, themselves as well, +1 to hit in combat for that turn, is it? Or is it until you're following hero phase?
It's until end of the turn.
Okay, so yeah, you'd have to keep doing it. And then why pick it? I said it's a key synergy for the strongest melee build in Disciples of Tzeentch. Its ranged output is strong, even without the +1 to hit. What am I trying to say there? Oh, even without the marker light kind of ability. And then it's a multi-use unit, especially considering their mobility. They have multiple functions. Their melee output isn't horrible. I'll actually skip to that first before you break it down for us. So this is their ranged output. 1 unit of 3 without all-out attack. I put that in here just because maybe you take a unit of 6 and you want to really make sure it goes through. Is doing a unit of 3 is doing somewhere between 3 to 4 damage against all saves average with all-out attack for the 4, and then obviously you could get double that if you roughly double that if you double them up. And then looking at their melee, if they marker light themselves, which they're not exactly trying to go into combat, but they're actually not horrible. A unit of 3 without having gotten that +1 to hit it's actually, they're both within a standard deviation of each other. It's around 3 1/4 to 3 1/2 worth of damage that the unit's doing, which is almost exclusively coming from the discs. So yeah, walk us through the Skyfires. You use them to great effect in our game, so I'm glad to see them be good again. I know that there was one point in Tzeentch history where Skyfires were kind of broken, but it's nice to see that they've got some good utility now, and it seems like you like them better than Enlightened on disc, which is an interesting shift. And maybe so walk us through all your thoughts with regards to those topics.
Yeah, so Skyfires, they like them, and then the Jungle Shaman and the Changeling all got massive glow ups, which is really good to see because they were all just not good units. But the Skyfires, they basically can do 2 different roles. One is, in my current build, I basically use them as pre-CP generation, because what they do is they shoot something and then they give the Zangor the +1 to hit. So it frees up your CP economy a lot. And it allows you to basically get all that attack in multiple places. That's one of the reasons why I run 2 units, because you have to select a target that you deal damage to. When I first started playing with them, I thought, oh wait, I can just like do 2 damage here, 2 damage there, 2 damage there, and then get +1 hit against everything. No, you have to pick one of the units that you have dealt damage to, and then you get the +1 to hit. It's also only your shooting phase, so you cannot covering fire to get the +1. That's also one of the things I missed in the beginning. It's your shooting phase, and it's only until the end of the turn, so it's not until later. But it's still so good because the 14-inch move and then the 18-inch shooting means that they are very good for doing tactics, but still being able to contribute what they want, basically, which is their +1 to hit and doing some damage. They can very easily do that from the sides, or like when they're taking an objective in the backfield, or like taking a terrain piece in enemy territory. They can still like shoot into whatever you need to do and get a gift above. Also, one of the good things is if you're running a pack of 6, because they ignore negative modifiers to hit and wound, if you give them the honor guard for the +1 to hit and wound, with covering fire, they're still going to be on 3s and 2s. Because they ignore the negative modifiers, but they gain the positive modifiers. And so into the General's Regiment, they're going to be on 13 attacks, 3s and 2s, -1 d3, which is actually pretty decent covering fire damage. So you have 2 different ways you can use them, depending on what you want and where your points is at, and where they are like just a very good unit. And they are just like the as you said, most of the damage output comes from the discs, which makes them extremely swingy because the discs are 4s and 3s -1 d3. So I've done like 8 damage with them, and I've done 0 damage with them. They don't have shooting combat, but that's not too bad because what you do is if they get tagged, you just teleport them out, which is why the Lore of Change, being able to cast it on someone in combat, is super useful. So they get tagged. Oh, I don't care. I teleport them out. They still get to shoot. You teleport them to the side or to an objective or wherever you need them, and they still basically function however you want them to. So I think they're just a super good synergy piece that builds onto the power that is in the Footsangor Warscroll and just levels it up another level.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan. And what is it about Enlighten on Disc, the regular melee version, that you're not as much of a fan of?
So they lost. All the Zangor basically lost the big profiles, which is fine. But then the Enlightened also lost one of their 3 spear profiles. So one of the 3 spear attacks. So they went from 3 attacks to 2 attacks, which is a very big damage output. And I don't know why, but all the Zangor are on 4s and 3s. And I get that for all the Zangors are on 4s and 3s, but the Enlightened are supposed to be like the elite Zangor, and like the Zangor that are better. Why are they not on 3s and 3s? They're like they get +1 damage on the charge if they're going second, or if you're the underdog, which is like really not happening that much. So the discs are just really expensive. They do less damage than Foot Zangor, like by quite a lot. Their old job was to be a super fast mobile hammer, or not hammer, but like scalpel, where you could send them in and they would just lift something important. They might die, but because they were super fast, they had fly, you could like threaten really important enemy enemy units. Now they just don't have the damage to do that anymore, so their job is just not good anymore. The fact that they lost their 3rd spear attack just sucks. And there's just so much more -1 to hit around. Them going to like 5s and 3s, then they're just like, okay, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, fair enough. I know you did take a unit of 3 Enlightened on foot in your list that you sent me. Is it mainly just because they're cheap, or what do you
It's
think?
mainly just points.
Yeah,
it's just there's nothing else for 90 points, and there's nothing else. Yeah, when we get to my list, I'll explain it all. But Enlightened Foot are also just like, yeah, they're fine, and that's all about it.
fair. Okay, yeah. So let's go down to the battle profiles now. Anyone that hasn't been following, list building is quite different now. You basically have regiments that you have to build around specific heroes, and the way they work is kind of complicated, kind of not. Not every army is built the same. I made an extensive video about this if you want to check that out, if you're not aware. But basically, we're looking at 2 different categories. Your heroes in the kind of pinkish area, and then in the baby blue, we've got our units units, as in the units that go in those regiments. So take a quick look at this, everyone, and then I'm going to move on to kind of like a summary slide in just a second here. To kind of just break it all down for us. So in my video, I kind of made some categories of different things that we might be seeing often in these profiles, one of which is an unlimited unit, which would be a unit that can be taken by literally every hero option. And Tzeentch doesn't have that. Like a lot of Chaos factions, it's kind of split between the demon side and the mortal side, which is called Arcanite for Tzeentch, and that means there isn't a single unit like in the blue section that actually can be taken by every single hero. Sometimes you see that with, like, say, Venari Wardens or something like that. Okay, the italics heroes are the heroes that could be taken inside of other heroes' regiments. So we've got two different types here. We've got the Changeling and the Changecaster being taken by all demon heroes except themselves. Of course, they can't take themselves or each other. And then similarly, we've got the Curseling, Magister on foot, not the disc version, and the Thaumaturge, which can be taken by the Magister. I've got a typo in there, Magister on disc, and Zangor Shaman. So a little less flexible. But this is a way to kind of keep you from jumping into auxiliary drops territory or getting too high in your drops, whatever you're trying to avoid, by, say, you want one of these types of heroes in a list, and then you pop them into someone else's regiment. Then we have what I'm calling the War Master types. This does not mean they're actually War Masters, but that'll be the types that can take literally anything in the book. So that's going to be your two Lords of Change, so Kairos is one of them, and the two Gaunt Summoners, one on foot, one on disc. They can take all of Disciples of Tzeentch, plus the 0-1 Changeling Changecaster, since all of these are demons. Hugo, off the top of your head, do you know which ones are the actual War Masters? As in, they have to be your general if you take them? Is it just Kairos?
It's just Kairos. Yes, it's just Kairos.
Okay. Yep. I like to distinguish between that just because obviously it could get confusing. Restricted unit. You don't have any. So this would be a type of unit that basically what this means, rewinding a bit, is a restricted unit would be one that if it can be taken by a hero, it can only be taken a limited number of times, like 0-1. But we don't have any of that in this list building, so that's nice. Meaning if it can be taken by a hero, you can take it freely, as in multiple copies of that unit. And then we've got two different basic keywords. We've got any demon, so all demon heroes except the Lords of Change and Gaunt Summoners can have this, which means they can take any demon. The reason those don't count is because they are what I said was a War Master type. They can take all the Arcanites as well, plus the Chaos Spawn. And then any Arcanite would be just all the Arcanite heroes. So, Hugo, I'm going to go back to the other slide there. Is there anything you want to say about the battle profiles here, about list building? Do you feel like it's particularly restrictive? What do you think of the italics heroes? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Just give us any thoughts that are, on the top of your mind right now.
Yeah, so I'll say it again here, what that I said before with the Gale Spawn. The Gale Spawn, because he's not a demon and not a Arcanite, can only be taken by the heroes that can take any Disciples of Tzeentch, so only the Gaunt Summoners and the two birds, which is fine, I guess, because you're most likely always going to take one, but if they weren't good, this would have been a real big issue. As for the other things, so the athletic heroes, that's we have a pretty good choice and set of what we want. It's most of the main stuff you would want to add, you could add, which is very important for Tzeentch. It used to be like a very caster heavy army, so if each caster would be a drop, that would really, really be bad. I think the standout is the Changeling. The Changeling is super good. Being able to deploy shenanigans, and then if someone misdeploys and you set him up and then you give them first and then you spawn their entire army turn 1 and stop everything, that's extremely good. He also, because his movement is in the deployment phase, that means that for take the flanks, he hasn't moved in this turn, so that just works. His minus movement ability is kind of funny with shackles combined, because then you can half move some or debuff the movement and then shackle them, and then they're just not moving at all. So I think he's really good, especially his price for 160. He's a 2-caster as well. So yeah, I really like him. I think the others are they're just yeah, they're just not good enough, or they're too expensive. Like a change caster at 140 is just too expensive. If he was like 120, 110, I would consider him as just like an add-on somewhere. But at 140, he just doesn't do enough because one of the things, and we didn't talk about it that much, but basically everybody lost their Warscroll spells.
Yeah.
The only people who have Warscroll spells, it's the Curseling, it's the Gun Summoners, and it's the Chickens. The rest, they're all gone. So that means that you're no longer taking heroes for their Warscroll spells. You're taking them for their abilities. And most of the other abilities. Oh, and the Changeling, I guess he also has a Warscroll spell. But yeah, they're just you just don't take them for that. And because Kairos is just such much better cost than anything else, he's going to be your main wizard. And the abilities on the rest of the small heroes are just not worth it. Overall, I think list building is fairly flexible, just because the stuff that like the two main heroes you always want to take can take anything. That just opens up any way you want to go. So if you want to go more Arcanite heavy, but you want like one or two demon stuff, okay, that's fine. Just you throw in Kairos. Kairos regiment. Do you want to go demon heavy, but you want like a Curseling, or Curseling couldn't, but like I don't know, maybe like a single Jade Obelisk, or like some Zangor. You can just do that because they can go with Kairos. That really helps with list building and just opening up basically whatever you want and what you want to do. So overall, I think list building, it's still very restrictive because that's the entire edition, but it's nowhere near as restrictive as some other armies are.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you. I mean, you play Khorne as well. I don't know how many lists you've written for Khorne. How is this in comparison to Khorne? Is Khorne more restrictive or not?
So I have written 0 lists for Khorne because I'm kind of on a Khorne break.
Sure.
After basically just playing them for 9 months, but I've still been in touch with people who play Khorne. I've seen lists, and for Khorne it's way worse because, for instance, Scarbrand, he can only take demons, and if Khorne, it's very much split down the middle, where it's only mortals go with mortals and only demons go with demons. And I'm very glad that this is not the case with Tzeentch, where you can actually the big guys can take anything, and that just opens it up way more. Because I've also been doing a bunch of cities list building, and in cities it's also do you want to take an elf? You want to take an elf unit? You need an elf hero. Do you want to take? And there it's even worse because there are sometimes you have. Oh, do you want to take a human unit? But these heroes can only take human infantry. So I'm actually really glad with how non-restrictive the Tzeentch list building is.
Yeah, when I described the different types of armies in that same video, I had said that it wasn't that the Chaos God armies weren't necessarily as flexible as they could be, but that they were generally split into two camps, and within those two camps, they were relatively flexible. So I guess there's something there. They're sitting somewhere in the middle of the spectrum of super easy to make lists or not. But I'm glad to hear your thoughts on it. Okay, so let's move on to some actual lists. I named your list for you, so as Double Shaman Warflock, but maybe that's a dumb name. This is the list you played against me, so I'll just read out what's here, and then you can walk us through it. I said you were in the Zongor Coven, but I might have that wrong. Was that true for this one? Because I didn't see it in the...
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
And you took Lore of Change to no one's surprise from what you've said thus far, and Morbid Conjuration. Your general's regiment was a Kairos, 20 Zongors, and 1 Chaos Spawn. Your second regiment was a Zongor Shaman with Nexus of Fate. You'll have to remind me which one that is again. And Nine-Eyed Tome for the +1 to cast and banish. What was Nexus of Fate again?
That's the in your turn you can roll a Destiny dice and you have to replace it.
Oh, right. And then 20 Zongors, 3 Skyfires. And your last regiment was a Zongor Shaman again, and the second one. 10 Zongors this time, another 3 Skyfires, and then 3 Enlightened on foot. Now, you had a 2,000 point list. I totaled up your health to being 166 plus whatever you bring back with the combination of the Chaos Spawn and then Zongors coming back. You had a total of 3 drops, obviously. And control, again, this could have been a plus because you could summon more. Well, no, it can't be because your Chaos Spawn, I was assuming your Chaos Spawn was on the board. You max out control at 69, which is still pretty nice. Now, I do have a question for you. With your Chaos Spawn that's in your General's Regiment, I know you told me this. Once it dies for the first time, it can't be chosen for Slay the Entourage or whatever the battle tactic's called. But once it comes back the second time, because it's not the same unit anymore. But is there any reason you didn't put it? I guess you didn't put it elsewhere because you can't. You'd have to take an aux unit, right? That's the reasoning behind that.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the big reason why it's there, because he cannot go anywhere else.
Okay. Now, yeah, obviously in our game that came up, but you still crushed me, where you accidentally had him on the table still, and then I chose him to kill him or whatever for the battle tactic. But has it become a problem or in any other game, or you have to be more selective about making sure that you don't let him die? Or you do let him die?
Because basically, the first time he spawns, he's always going to die. And if they already chose, like, you spawn him in usually when they already chose a different battle tactic. So then you just spawn him in, he dies, and then you never have to worry about it. Or he comes in after turn 3, because that's also a thing. If he comes in after turn 3, he dies. So he's no longer, if you then use the spawn spell to get one, that's no longer the original one because he died.
Oh.
So he isn't in the general regiment anymore. So I've never found it, like, in our game it came up, and that's the only time it ever came up in like the 20 plus games I've played.
Nice.
It's when I played against Tzeentch 2 days ago, my opponent also thought, why didn't you choose the Chaos Spawn for the against the general regiment? And I said no, the Chaos Spawn already died. This is a replacement unit. This is not in the general regiment, so I cannot choose him. So yeah, it's kind of a weird interaction, but that's why it works.
Yeah.
But yeah, the list overall.
Yeah.
The core of this list is Kairos, 40 Zangor, 2 Shamans, and 2x3 Skyfires. And then, of course, the Chaos Spawn. But what that core does for you is that it gives you just so many wounds, because you see the health. It's like, it allows you to go to like 140 health very easily, which is quite high. And then with the recursion, it's even better. The list is basically built around big bricks of 20 Zangor. And then the Shamans and the Skyfires are there just to support it and to keep the engine going, and to just like do everything. You need 2 Shamans, both for just to get for the drops, but also I found that having 2 Shamans, so having 2 basically chances at the run and charge where you need it, and having 2 recursion, basically recursion tricks per turn, makes it so that you're way less likely to lose a unit.
Yeah.
Because that's the big thing about this army, where a lot of armies have recursion by bringing back units. This list has recursion by not losing a unit. If you lose the full unit, it's super bad. If you have 1 Zangor left on 1 wound, it's totally fine. Yeah, it's I first started out with playing the demon build, and then someone pointed me to like the Zangor heavy build, and then I had instantly way more success with this, and this has been way more my kind of like playstyle. It's very anti what you would think of Tzeentch. I was playing against someone who was playing Lumineth, and I basically turn 1, there were 40 Zangors in his face, and he didn't expect that at all. It seems like, why would I? Like, I can give you first. It's gonna be fine. We're 18 inches apart. No, 40 Zangor in your face. Good luck. About the last, like, I first had instead of the Chaos Spawn and then the 10 Zangor and the Enlightened, I used to have 20 Zangor to have like 3 big bricks, but I needed the Chaos Spawn, so then I had 240 points. I've been toying around with that. I tried 6 Flamers. They just don't do much in this build because they're too short range and you're going to be more aggressive. Nobody's going to come into you. The Enlightened have been fine. They're just there for 90 points to have a screen, to something you can throw around, sometimes stop a command, but not really doing much. It's, if I had 10 more points, I would swap them out like in a heartbeat for for 3 Screamers. That it would be much better, but you don't. So this is where I've currently settled on.
Yeah, I feel like the Screamers are definitely great for what they cost now.
Yeah.
But no, your list. I mean, you're the only person. I've played only 8 games this far, and of course, I'm back in the States now, so I can't really play. But you're the only one that like just brutally destroyed me out of all the people I played against, and I've been just playing Ideneth lately. So maybe I would have played it differently. I definitely made some mistakes, but in any case, I think this list has a lot of. It's got a lot of potential, and it seems like you're. Do you know what your win rate is with this list? Have you been doing pretty well?
This is probably like up to 75% or something.
Wow.
It's yeah, I've lost 3 games with this, and I've played roughly like 15 games. So like, yeah, up there.
That's amazing.
And like I've been tabling people with this list like turn 3. It's people get super surprised. It's also because they just don't know what this does. So I've had people like charge in like 5 medium calf and thinking, oh yeah, they'll do fine. They will tie him up, and then those 5 medium calf die on their turn, and then I'm still free and they lost their 5 calf, and it's like, wait, what? Or I've like I just stood there and fought with Nurgle for 3 turns, and then he died and I didn't.
Yeah.
This list can grind really well. You just have to be really, really careful against the really big hammers. Like Varangard, this hates going against Varangard because Varangard will just instantly lift 20, and then it sucks. Yeah. So, but yeah, I've so far it's been really good.
So the one last question I have for you is, as much as I know you love Zongor, and maybe your kind of interpretation of what it means to play Tzeentch is a little different than everyone else's, I think a lot of people out there might say this doesn't feel all that Tzeentchy at the end of the day. I mean, it's a melee build. It's almost exclusively Zongor, and it's not necessarily. I mean, it does have important magic component with Kairos especially, but it's not necessarily doing what we used to think of Tzeentch as being with regards to control, perhaps, or definitely with just mortal damage from spells. Granted, a lot of that's been pulled back, and it's not even using the Weird Flame thing, really, I don't think. So does this feel like a Tzeentch army to you, and does it have any kind of dissonance for you about the narrative of what Tzeentch is, or does that not matter at all, or where you sit on that spectrum?
No, so this doesn't feel like a Tzeentch army to me, but like it feels like Tzeentch to me because I still have Kairos and I have the Zangor, and the Zangor have always been like I've basically always played with at least like 300 to 400 points of Zangor, which yeah, so that in that case still feels like Tzeentch, but it feels completely different. But all the Tzeentch feels completely different because the super high Magic Dome Castle army just isn't around anymore. It just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's one of the reasons why I'm now starting to play other things and try to look at other things because it's not really what I want out of Tzeentch. It's a fun list to play, but it's not. There's not too many tricks in it. It's a fairly straightforward list. It's you scrum in the middle and then you see who's left standing, and yeah, it's I don't know. It's been decently fun to play, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for.
Sure. So let's move on to the other list you sent. This isn't you didn't write this one, right? This is from Teo. His last name seems to be quite Greek, but you said he's from Sweden, right?
Yeah, he was on the Swedish Worlds team, and he's a really good player. I talked to him on Discord a bunch, and yeah, he went 5-0 with this basically in the first like week or 2 weeks. They had like a GT, and he went 5-0 with this.
Wow. Okay, so this one probably is going to feel a little more traditionally Tzeentchy, but let me run through it real quick and hear you talk about what makes it tick. I called it Lords of Weird Flame just because it's got a couple Lords of Change. It's in Weird Flame Host, Lore of Changes again, and Morbid Conjuration. We've got Kairos again, and this time in his regiment 6 Flamers, which admittedly are pretty easy to remove. Granted, a lot of things in Tzeentch are easy to remove, I guess. The second regiment's got a Lord of Change with, he's got the Illusionist. That's the -1 to hit, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And then the artifact for the Weird Flame Blade, which is the one that can give burning if it does some damage in combat, as you were mentioning. Then we've got 3 Flamers, 3 Screamers, and a Chaos Spawn, the obligatory Chaos Spawn now. And then the third regiment is 1 Changeling. As you mentioned, there's some tech there too. He's a unique character. And then you've got 20 Blue Brim Horrors. And then you've got 2 times 10 Pink Horrors to help kind of like eat up some, wounds and bring each other back and all that great stuff. It's a total of 2,000 points once again. The health is 148 plus, not accounting for the Chaos Spawn, I guess. 3 drops once again, and then total control is a little less than what you had, but obviously probably a little bit more traditional tank power with the blues and all the horrors. But your Zongor with all their resurrection were also pretty tanky. I do have a question about the Chaos Spawn. In reading it on this list, I said kind of obligatory Chaos Spawn, but it made me think, well, you were talking about how great that lore is. What if you don't have the 60 points? Would you can still take the lore just even knowing that one of your 3 spells falls off?
I think you find your 60 points somewhere and you put it in a spawn.
Okay, fine.
I would still take it, but so I was playing before my Zangor build without this spawn, and then when I was toying around with the last 400 points, and then so I was talking to some of the other great Tzeentch players in the world, and one of them said, you have to play a spawn. So I played 1 game with a spawn, and he single-handedly won me the game by tying up 10 bow snakes, 10 spear snakes, 3 doomfires for 2 turns. And after that, he's just been always in. I think if you don't have the spawn in, you find 60 points somewhere and you put in a spawn. That thing is super, super good. Would I still play Lord of Change without it? Yes, because teleports are amazing and unlimited spells pretty good. But just find your 60 points. It's the best 60 points you can spend.
Yeah, and that spell
probably in the game.
That spell still does mortal damage even if you can't summon a spawn, right? Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, so walk us through the list. What makes this tick? Why is it? How did it go 5-0? Is it just that it's the start of the edition? When we talked about it, you weren't you were talking about this being the other build or something like it, and it seemed like you weren't convinced by Tzeentch at this point, but then even as you referenced in this video, you mentioned that Tzeentch, to your surprise, is one of the strongest armies right now. Is it this kind of list? Is it your list? Is it something in between? What are we talking about? Just hit all those topics for us while you're covering this list, too. I'm curious how Tzeentch is sitting right now.
Yeah, so the 2 main archetypes that have shown some promise, it's the full Zangor build, and it's basically a horror spam with double chicken build. This build is just a pure control build. What it does is it just chucks blues and brims, blues and pinks in your face, which have way too many shots for some reason. For some reason, 20 blues have 40 shots. And then they're just there to slow you down. And then to use Morbid Conjuration to do a lot of damage, to use the 6 Flamers, because the 6 Flamers are you said they're very easy to remove, but you're never getting to them because there's so many layers in front. And if you could get to the 6 Flamers, it means that you're not killing Kairos and you're not killing the Lore of Change, which are the 2 most important pieces of that list. And 6 Flamers, they don't do that much damage, but for 240 they don't need to do that much damage. And you can layer some pretty decent buffs or debuffs on the enemy on them to suddenly if for 240 points you do 10 or 12 damage to a 4-up save, that's pretty good. And then you give them the +1 to hit and wound against the enemy's general regiment, and then they suddenly start to really, really do work. The way this list works is by stopping your opponent from doing tactics and from moving with the spawn, debuffing them with -1 to hit from the Lore of Change, -1 to wound from the sub-faction, and then just having stuff there, and then using the Lore of Change to bring back units. This list is going to go almost always going to go down on points in the first 2 turns, just because it has to play cagey, it has to be a very big castle. But it can do that because it has such a good long game, and because Kairos smooths out your battle tactics so much. Where in the early turns, where you're I only have 1 or 2 options, Scout says, yeah, sure, do that one again. You're all good, man. So that's also really good. And the just the amount of wounds that you get in this list, because it says 148, but really it's like 200 plus easily. And that's just super hard to deal with. And they are just going to chip you down, chip you down, chip you down. Unless you have really great recursion of yourself, like Soul Blight or something like that, they are just going to chip you down. And then suddenly, your big hammer is like down to half strength. It's not a big hammer anymore. And then the damage starts to come out from the chickens. And it's the more I've seen it, the more impressed I've been. Just because at first I was like, oh yeah, you're like you just get tabled on turn 2 and you don't have any damage. You have not a lot of damage, but you have so much staying power that you can actually just go down like 10 points and then still win the game easily.
Yeah, referencing all the points or the wounds coming back, the total health. I did account for the blues turning into brims in the calculation, but I guess you're referring to the Lord of Change, his recursion ability.
Yeah.
Now, granted, each one of those units can only come back once at half strength, right? So that's another, for the blues and brims, that's another 20 wounds worth. And then for the pinks, that's 2 separate units of 10, which each have 20 wounds. So that's 2 separate instances of 10 wounds, I guess. Yeah. So
the blues are not 10 wounds. It's then going to be like 16 wounds because on the 3-up they split.
Fair.
And like if you want to, you can like put blues back into a unit where so you can get even more wounds. And then, or if you like, oh, half the unit is dead and you have a CP extra, oh, you really like 4 blues back. That's just 4 blues plus like an extra 2 or 3 brims that you're getting back. And it's just so many just like layers and layers and layers of getting stuff back and just like stuff in your face that it's actually just like they just chip you down over 3 to 4 turns, and then turn 4, turn 5, you're not going to have much stuff left, and then they can just dominate the board.
Yeah, for the record, I forgot about the 3-up, the roll to bring them and turn them into brims. So or whatever the roll is. Is that coming from the pinks going to the blues and brims, or is that from the blues and blues splitting to brims? I forget how it's worded.
Yeah, so it's pinks can go to can bring back. That's from the or can return slain blues to a unit.
Yeah.
Which means that also one of the good things you have to think about is that splitting works entirely differently. And the old splitting where you had to first kill all the blues before you could start killing brims, that's gone. And the blues that die count as being slain, so you can rally them. So a unit of 20 blues can start as 20 blues and then end up as 20 blues and 20 brims. That's totally legal. So it's you can do some funky stuff, and also like the pinks for 140, they're 20 wounds, and they're kind of like they can do 5 mortal damage to someone in return. So they hold you up for a turn. They like kill like 2 or 3 for guys. And then they come back as 5. They're going to be annoying again. It's just a whole lot of chip damage.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I didn't account for that in my total health, but obviously, like you're saying, there's going to be more than 148 anyway. So yeah, pretty cool. I mean, have you played this list? Do you like playing it? Where are you sitting on that?
So I've not played this list. I've played a different list. They had, but it basically it was like the core list was the same. I dislike the play pattern. I think it's just boring, but the list is really good. Like the list is just really good. I think the last stats I've seen this like Tzeentch is sitting at like 60-63% win rate just because you just put way too many bodies on the board, and because morbid concentration is just super good in this. And this build uses it the best because that's also one of the things to think about. It's not just the extra like stuff you get back from the horrors and stuff. It's also putting down 20 wounds of invocations or like endless spells a turn, and like them doing a lot of damage, and it's just so rough to chew through. But I think this kind of build, it's really good. It's a little bit meta dependent because if we're going to like a high cav meta, this could be a problem because spawning is going to be a lot more of a problem. But in the current meta, I think this is it's really good.
Nice. Yeah, shout out to Teo for writing this list. I know he didn't give his permission for us to share it, but it's cool that we get to feature someone who's won a tournament already, or gone 5-0, I should say. All right, let's move on to kind of concluding thoughts here. We were talking about internal and external balance, impact on the meta, and closing thoughts. External balance is a bit of impact on the meta. There's a lot of overlap there. And then also, It's early days. Obviously, you're keeping up with it better than almost anyone I know with what's going on. But obviously, everyone's still trying to solve the system, and there's so many things moving around, so many moving pieces. So it's hard to say. But walk us through internal balance first with the book. How are you feeling? Do you feel like it's too lopsided, and there's only a couple things that are obviously good, and the rest is crap? Where are we sitting there?
I think there's just a couple of units that it's so the main problem is all the small heroes. They need a lot of work because they just don't do anything. Like a Fate Skimmer doesn't do anything. A Changecaster doesn't do anything. Like a Curseling does almost nothing. Like a Foot Magister or Disc Magister does almost nothing. They need a lot of work, and they used to be able to do stuff because they had like Warscroll spells and you took them for that, but now they don't. So that's something that needs a lot of work. We didn't talk about Carracks at all. Carracks are just. Or you mentioned them that they're no longer wizards. They've gotten so much worse. So that needs a lot of work, and the manifestations need work. But overall, I think the internal balance is not too bad. I think the demon list might just have too many wounds, and that needs to be fixed. But overall, I think it's fine. The only thing I dislike is that you have two different ways to build, and they never meet. And there's no way for them to meet just because the way the demon side is set up, and mainly because the way the Lord of Change is set up, where if you take him, you need a lot of demons to make his like to for him to bring his like 360 point value. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the main thing about like internal balance. I think impact on the meta. I think it's not as good as like the main armies. Like it's not as good as Night Hunt. Nowhere near as good. It's nowhere near as good as Soul Blight. But I think it's probably still going to be too good. I think especially just the horrors need to go need the points increase.
Okay. Which horrors in particular? Both or blues?
Both.
Okay.
And also, this army uses Morbid Conjurations, probably the best of any army in the game. And since they are so much better than anything else, if that gets significantly nerfed, this will also take quite a big hit.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I don't have a dog in this fight yet because I haven't started playing yet, and I'm still trying to figure out what I do with all those extra birds that I've got because I don't need 4 anymore. So, and then the Flamers build seems to be. We already talked about it in private at one point about how the rest of the buff pieces for the Flamers are. Like the Chariot version, the Burning Chariot, and the Exalted Flamer really aren't worth their points. So I'm gonna have to kind of play around with it a bit. But I think it's gonna be a while before I jump in on Tzeentch again. But I'm liking seeing that it got kind of shifted around a bit, and that some things that used to not be so great have gotten a boost. Any closing thoughts you want to throw in before we get going here?
No, I thought I said just about everything I wanted to say. It's been an interesting journey playing Tzeentch. It's you got to reconfigure your brain for the new army, and I don't say I necessarily like all the changes, but I think they mainly just need a second design pass on a lot of the stuff, and if they like fix some of the very glaring issues, I think the book can be really fun and really cool.
Cool. Okay, yeah, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to trying out myself and having more games against you, of course. I'll go and move on to the closing thoughts here for just wrapping up the video. Thanks again to everyone that checked this out. I know they're long videos, but those seem to also be quite popular. And our tier list we did with Hugo, I don't know, 9 months ago or so ago, was pretty successful. So thank you for that. Hopefully you guys liked his insights this time around as well. And I know I did. So let us know what you're thinking down below. Share this with some Tzeentch fans out there. I'll try to make sure it hits some of the right channels, but we always rely on you guys for helping boost the signal a bit. So thank you so much. Comment down below. Join the Discord. I'm sure Hugo's happy to answer questions in either place. And until next time, guys, Ryan out.